Tonight, Alan and Jim and maybe Mr. Corby as well are going to go through the current recommended budget and go through the presentation there, and then we will also review the draft recommendations that have been circulating among our group for the last couple weeks, and that's kind of what I have on the agenda. So, Alan, we'll start with you.
Go through it rather quickly. This budget keeps changing, nothing big, because we keep running into comparability issues. Have we got the last comparability issue resolved?
We think so. We're just going to sit on it tonight and then hopefully issue it tomorrow. There's no big issues. I think right now it's a total of about 4 additional FTEs in the teacher ranks.
So DEA kind of came up with some new rules last week, so we've been battling that all week. So we're trying to adjust the budget, get the comparability right, and then we'll get a document out to the board, hopefully, the next day or two. But this is kind of where it's going to shake out, and I'm not going to go too much into the district goals. Are pretty much the same as they were last time. We'll look at the original, the 2011-2012 original budget versus where we've amended it to. And basically, you can see that we've increased revenue $2 million, which is basically for insurance recovery, and we've increased expenditures by $16 million. And we'll slide over here. The expenditure increases were basically rolling over purchase orders from one year to the next year, $6 million. We had a new school rollover about $2 million. Insurance recovery was about $2.6 million. So the only budget expenditures that we made are basically 16.7 over last year's adopted budget. Right now, it looks like we're going to have a positive spending variance. So we think our fund balance will go up to about $141 million. That's unencumbered, unreserved, so we think at the end of the year we should be at least at $141 million. So we'll start out July 1 with 141.
You start out this year at what?
121.
Okay.
So we've grown from 121 to 141. Basically, that's because of all the vacancies that we had during the year.
That's the question. What's the highest our fund balance has ever been?
I don't know. Do you know?
It was 135, but then it was restated, and so the real number is probably around 120, and that was a total fund balance, not the unencumbered, unassigned portion. They changed the rules and classifications differently, but we're definitely above where we've ever been.
And our goal is we're trying to get to 60 days, 90 days. What are we trying to get to? 30 days?
GFOA recommendation, DEA recommendation is 2 months, which is about $200 million.
The real measure is how do we finance our operations on a year-round basis out of fund balance rather than having to borrow.
Right.
Because right now it's not a big killer because the interest rates are so low.
So low.
As interest rates rise, and we'll need 200 to 225 to do that.
We need 200 to 225 to not have to access a working capital line.
That's an approximate right now. And again, out of a lot of that, it moved. That's a moving target because of the way the state funds us and the level they fund us.
And right now, what at our max borrowing levels, what's the most we borrow under our working capital line?
Well, I think we borrowed $80 million this year.
Sorry, Al.
Key points in this budget is we've consolidated 10 schools and we've opened 5 new schools. We've increased the staffing ratio from pre-K from 22 to 1 to 24 to 1. We reduced custodial services by $10 million. Legal services we reduced by $2 million. We addressed the board's priority on pre-K by adding 1 aide per each teacher. We've funded middle year programs at J. Long and Harry Stone. We funded an early college high school at Samuel, a dual language program at Rosemont. We've expanded the 10th grade to the 10th grade at Maceo Smith and Barack Obama, and we added back 7th grade athletics. So when you put all that into a document, you can see that our revenues decreased $34 million and our expenditures decreased about $35 million. So basically, we're more or less balanced. We will be balanced at some point in time, as soon as we work through all these documents. The biggest change is naturally payroll. It went down $22 million. And if you take a look at all of our budgets, the general fund, food service, debt service, and all will be balanced. General fund revenue basically went down $34 million. which is what we kind of projected. Local share last year was 63%. Local share next year is 65%. When you look at our tax rates, right now, we're showing that a 97% collection rate, and then our tax rate will basically be $1.04 for M&O, $1.04, 25 cents for debt service. This year, it's going to go down to 24.2, or it could go down to 24.2 for a slight decrease.
So I'm sorry, these tax rates, slight decrease, 0.7 cents.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And then you can see our budget by function. Basically, every function went down a little bit except for social work services. It's a small function. Instruction in our current budget is 60.81%. In our proposed budget, it's going up to 61.63%. So instruction is becoming a bigger portion of our budget, which it needs to be. When you look at it by payroll cost, payroll is 81.22%, and next year it's 81.8%. So it's going up a little bit, and most of that, I think, was in supplies and materials.
You said instruction's going up, and it should be. Do you have a view on where it should be going to?
Instruction, yeah, I'd like for it to be 100%. 61 to 65% is in the ballpark. So we feel like we're in there with everybody else. But the more money, the bigger piece of the pie they get, I feel like that's always better. So we did bump up a little bit. Most of it change was from, like, I think supplies and materials 3.8. Contracted services stayed exactly the same, 12.55, 12.55. It's kind of odd.
So even though we added back 7th grade athletics, extracurriculars going down?
Yeah, but that is probably due to reclassifying everything where it should be. Is that right, Jim?
Yes.
You moved junior ROTC to fine
Some
art
of the
room.
stipends and some of the extra pay weren't classified in the right function.
And one of the comments you made was about reducing our legal costs by $2 million. Is that based on what we've seen this year?
So far, our legal costs will be going down. We did hire 2 attorneys, and we transferred 2 temporary people from contract to in-house employees. We've told them that they can't go out for any services except for E-rate and OPR, and then the board has theirs, so we're trying to reduce that. So we are seeing it trend down a little bit, and we're hoping that it will stay that way.
Do you have a sense for the percentage of, or the number of non-renewals this year versus last year?
Steve?
Well, we're considerably up on non-renewals. I don't have those numbers right now. We've handed out, there have been a lot more non-renewals this year than there have been in previous years. Some of the performance ones have gone way up. We're still waiting for the net result in Group 3, which was the biggest group that was reflected of the 24 to 22 shift and the closing of schools and the move of 6th grade to junior high, because all those people got not released and non-renewed, and now we're in the process of trying to fill those jobs. So I don't know. I would suspect we've always managed to go into the following year at about 75 to 125 excess, 150 maybe, and I would say we'd be in that range this year also.
Okay.
But I don't have the exact non-renewal stats.
Real quick, do you see an increase in the number of TEA hearings on the non-renewals?
I mean, so far, it's really in this last group, Rena. I mean, the first 2 groups, there was minor, or just very minor hearings. There was not a lot. We resolved most of the issues, had a lot of S-54s out of those 2 groups. That was the January and February groups. And then the March group was by far and away the largest. And until we get all the way through and try to, all of those people we should be able to place, we hope. But there's going to be some mixes between bilingual and gen ed, math, and
Right.
social studies and stuff like that. So I don't know right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Then we look at our budget by object, you see we got $945 million in salaries, $681 million in professional, $133 million in support, and $130 million in benefits. Kind of gives you a comparison of what our salaries schedules look like compared to 5 or 6 districts we have here, the bachelors.
Alan, the $3 million state mandated remediation, $3 or $4 million, whatever that number's going to be, that's just being sort of absorbed into the instructional?
Sure, if I know what you're asking me.
Well, we had $3 million of remediation services that provided by state funding last year that they're not providing that funding this year.
Are you talking about the after-school program?
Yeah, the summer school and.
Summer school is a result of STAR.
No, I think he's referring to a grant, I think you're referring to the grant which was tutorials after school. I forgot the name of the grant, but that was, and I don't think that grant has been refunded, so I think the answer to your
We
question
have
is
absorbed the cost of the remediation for higher than normal expected for STAR and in the course.
It's in the budget.
It's in the budget, it's just worked into it, is what it looks
So
like.
now, as that thing rolls out, the number's going to get bigger. I mean,
Right.
next year it'll get bigger because there's more kids being tested, and it's going to continue to go up. And right now, it's anybody's guess.
I think that we listed 5 things that we wanted to make sure that the budget contained funds to pay for. One was higher costs of summer remediation due to higher standards associated with STAR. If we made any sort of budget allowance for the fact that we might have search firm costs associated with filling these senior level positions that have been vacated. Restructuring HR. Cost to implement the new evaluation system for teachers. And then potentially costs associated, well, I think E has to do with our recommendation of trying to go through K through 12 feeder pattern directors, and you may have to potentially pay them more if they're running an entire feeder pattern versus just the high school. But that, obviously, you haven't implemented that as part of your management structure, so maybe we put that to the side. But, A through D, I think we've all kind of agreed we're probably going to do it. And so we were just trying to make sure that you guys felt that there was enough budget dollars in here to cover those 4 items.
Specifically, like for the STAR Commission recommendation, we've stuck $1 million in there.
Okay.
We've also stuck $1 million in there for the new superintendent to allocate wherever he so all those things are kind of in that.
Okay. Okay.
Real quick at the salaries, and when you go to our 6,200, we got 145 million in the 6,200. 47 million of that is utilities. We've been piloting our, how many schools are in that pilot group? About 20?
I think 18.
In the first 2 months, they saved how much?
Well, the first month it's $17,000, and the payout was $4,000, so they saved about $21,000, but the net is $17,000 saved, and it'll probably be approximately the same for February, so. we're just getting
As a
catch up.
percentage, how much did they save?
I'll have to research the percentage savings.
And then today also, we told everybody that on April 15th that we're going to turn off all the computers at 7 o'clock every night. That's going to save us $1.2 million, so we're starting to get that kicked up a little bit. It was $100,000 a month. Isn't that what he said? $100,000 a month? Is that right, Joel?
100,000.
So that's 1.2 million. Transportation service are in here at 25 million, and the phone's in here at 10 million. So basically, that's our 6,200. 6,300 is nearly all allocated. The technology equipment is an increase over 2 years ago because we shifted it from one fund to another fund.
Is that the computers throughout the district at 7 PM?
Yeah, but that's really the computers throughout the district comes from the construction fund. That's where all the money is. We've got about $100 million in that construction fund, and that's where they're using that money.
But cutting them off is across the district.
Right.
Oh, is that what you're asking?
Right,
I'm
right.
sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
It's desktop.
I mean, the desktops.
Just the
the
right.
servers that support the network and the payroll processing and all that'll stay up, but all the desktops will be
Okay,
and laptops.
thank you.
Is it a centralized switch?
It's a program they install on each one, and it goes off at 7 o'clock if they're not using it. If they're still using it, it will stay on. And if it goes off and they're desk, they can come back and log back on and do it. So our supplies and materials is 40 million. Our 6,400, which is other operating, is 14 million. Travel budget went up a little bit, but not much. And we had cut it last year. I'm still not real sure what happened to 6412, because most of that shouldn't have decreased. And what may have happened there is we've shifted money from one place to another place to cover these events when they go past the district level. We fund that, and that could be a shift there.
Alan, at a certain point, when is the chart of accounts going to settle down so we can start taking a look at, some of the finer details year over year? I mean, it seems like every year the chart changes so that we're not, stuff is moved from one account to another, and it was really egregious before you got here, where entire departments would be shuffled around, and you've brought a tremendous amount of stability, but still, is this going to settle down in the next year so that we can really
I
start
think we're
looking?
real close. Jim?
Yeah, I think that we're close. We have budget analysts that look at every line item every single month, and we move months to make sure that we don't have any red accounts, and we put out what is called a cheat sheet, and we've produced about 750 of those. We've made training for all office manager and budget managers are invited so that we're consistent in our coding of all accounts. So I think that we've got a pretty good handle on it. Is there going to be some percentage of error? Yeah, there'll always be some percentage of error, but we're trying to be sure that we're in line. And right now, I don't know anything off the top of my head that was totally out of line this year.
Like the 6412, maybe that's what you're talking about. What happens there is we have them budget for their normal competition. If they happen to advance to district, state, and all that other level, then we fund that from another case. So that would be why your current budget would be a little bit higher than your other budget. So that, we think we've got it all straight. I think the biggest issue we had this year was stipends and extra duty pay in Function 36. So I think we're good. But of course, somebody wrote this article that we're not accounting very well. I don't know if y'all saw that. Our chart of accounts is not very good on a statewide basis, and so they may try to change that. I don't think they've ever looked at the chart of accounts, but we feel like we're classifying everything as required by the resource guide. We feel pretty good about it.
Well, the resource guide does change, has a tendency to change from year to year,
But minimal,
dramatically.
usually minimal, and usually somebody want to account for something, some legislator say, hey, I want to know how much we're spending on pies, and so they might have to put in an account for pies or something like that, but, it's been pretty stable the last few years. Services, most of that is the TANs that we have to borrow money for to operate on, which Steve was talking about earlier. Basically, the changes from the previous year. We've changed staff by about 91. This is probably not exactly right yet, because it's going to be 191 when we get finished with the change we made on Friday.
So less than 1%. Okay.
There's a breakdown by category.
Can you go back to that one more time? I'm sorry. Okay. We have 430 open slots today. We have 430 open slots we're trying to recruit for today.
That's why we have that surplus, is because we have so many vacancies around. We got to get out of having any vacancies. I told the group, this is not a reasonable goal, but I told the principals last week that I wanted every position filled before we leave for the summer. And, we can't have vacant positions. It's not good for our kids, but that's going to be our goal. It's not possible, but, and 400 is not it seems like not a lot, but when you
Two per
consider how many
campus.
people we have,
And
you
it
know,
turns,
it's
it's
not-
always turns.
So one thing we have included in this budget, which is different than what the Budget Commission recommended, is we are not, we don't think we can sell I'm pretty sure we can't sell contracting out any of the custodial services. So what we thought we'd try is we're going to try to manage it in-house, and we took a blend of the two different custodial proposals I got one from one group, one from another group, and then combine that with the contracted management proposals. So basically, the first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to take control of the custodial department, and it's not going to be handled by the principals. It's going to be handled by it's going to report to Joel Falcone. We've already talked to Joel. Joel's going to be successful with it. So all the custodial department will report to Joel Falcone. All 1,000 custodians will ultimately be his responsibility. So we'll take the top of that chart, and we're going to reorg, and we're going to repost and rehire the management structure for that whole organization. And we'll start doing that. Then we're going to reduce salaries by 10%, not 7%, like it was in one proposal. Or not 17%, like was in the other proposal that one of the custodians gave us. So we're going to reduce salaries by 10%. Then we're going to reduce the number of days that some of them work during the summer. We're going to eliminate all subs. We're going to change the salary structure so that anybody new will be hired at the proper wage rate. And we're going to make sure we're going to reduce 100 custodians so that we make sure they all clean 30,000 square foot. So we're going to try that, and I don't know, Joel or Dino, do we know if the contractors were going to hold their price for a while so that if we weren't successful, we could kick them back in? Yes. So I don't know, how long was that going to be? Anyway, so that was going to be all our alternative. So we thought we'd give the custodian department a chance to operate like they did in that fashion. We're going to evaluate them, send out principal evaluations just like we do all the others. And if they're successful, we'll continue. If not, we'll have to look at some alternative. But this will get us somewhere in the neighborhood of $8 million, and Joel's going to have to come up with another million or so. The biggest one that concerns me is no substitutes when custodians are absent, but that's what the group recommended the last meeting. So if they say they can do it, we'll try it. I don't think it'll work, but we'll give it a try. And that would be one of the biggest changes.
I left the last meeting just wondering how we have a campus where the parents are cleaning the building.
I don't think that's happening.
Okay.
We ought to do it everywhere, I guess, save a lot of money. We're paying everybody at every campus, so. Joel, have you ever heard that?
Yes, sir.
Roughly, remind me, the senior management team wasn't it roughly 40 people, 45 people?
No, I think we were looking at a line above that. How many people, Joel?
I think it started out at 40 at one time, but it's less than that.
How many are we looking at reposting and refilling? Dino, do you remember?
It's 8.
Huh?
I believe it's 8 managers without the administrative assistants.
Basically, if you look at the custodians, we have basically 1,000 custodians. About 800 of them are making reasonably close to market. Even with a 10%, they're still going to be a little over market, but we have those 800 are okay. It's these other 200 that are making about 75% over market, and that's the ones that are really throwing this thing way out of whack. But we'll start off by doing that 10% reduction to everybody. We'll leave everybody on their existing campus. We're going to lose 100 custodians, and then any new custodians will come in at the new pay schedule.
That'll be a combination of attrition probably from the.
Yeah, if we had enough turnover over a period of time, then everybody would, we'd work ourselves back into market. But, if we had 10% a year, it'd take 10 years, but I don't know how long that's going to take.
How did we end up with 75% above pay? I mean, how did that?
I can't tell you. All I can tell you is that we got 200 of them making about $20 an hour, and they should be in the in the $13 an hour range.
Is longevity?
Yeah, real good longevity.
Well, longevity, and it may be because they're classified as some sort of supervisor. They've been running boilers when they didn't have certification, so it could be a number of things. I don't know the answer, but we got 200 of them. But, we'll try this. Joel started working on that. We're going to try to get that information out, and if it doesn't work, then we're going to go back to the Budget Commission recommendation. But right now, we don't think the other one will fly.
Ellen, that option one, which I thought was the best option anyway, seems like where you've headed here. I know there was some pushback on adjusting the custodial hours to later in the evening. Is that going to be part of this? Are you going to look at that first option and sort of?
When they show up, remember that's the
Joel, what do
position.
y'all
To
get?
show up later and stay later?
Yeah, we're gonna look at those, we're gonna look at that option.
Okay. I know there was some pushback for some safety issues, but I
guess it would depend on the neighborhood, wouldn't it?
yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. So it's probably a school by
We're
school.
also looking at maybe doing something along the lines of maintenance as well, so that would be part of our support at night.
Oh, okay. Great idea.
So we think we're getting 10 of the 17. The 17 is what we thought we could get outsourcing, if I remember
I
right.
try to get 10 of that, and all I put into this budget was 10, because I didn't think we were going to get it anyway.
Question. Why, if there's 200 people making 75% above, but we're telling everybody to take a 10% cut, can you tell 200 people to take a 30% cut, or?
We could, but I thought it would be easier just to give them the 10% and then work our way out of it. That way it'd be less pain for everybody. I mean, we could tell 75%. We just went with the 10.
But you think everybody needs the 10 anyway to get into?
Everybody,
More equitable.
the bottom group needs a 10 to get close, and the top group needs about 75% to get back in there.
Are you guys also looking at a cap for long-term, salary cap, so we're not an hourly wage cap?
Everybody's got it. We're gonna cut you 10%, and then we're gonna go to the pay schedule. We're not gonna cut you anymore. Anybody that's hired in there will be on that new pay schedule, which was in that proposal that was submitted.
I do 200 custodians times 40 hours a week, times $7 an hour, it's $3 million. That's the ballpark for those 200 people. Okay.
Where, the calculation for 75% above market, is that just a comparison for other districts?
Yeah. They went out, what they did with the what they did is they went out and surveyed all the area, not other districts, but what the districts in this area plus what the industry was doing, and that's how they came up with that amount.
Because none of the districts in this area are nearly as large as ours.
Well, these guys, large doesn't matter.
Yeah, large doesn't matter.
Just the footage,
Classroom's a
square
classroom.
footage.
But a classroom's a classroom.
Yeah, but not, some of them you have the size of a closet that they've stuck kids in. So it's-
I'm talking about square footage clean.
Okay, okay.
Special revenue funds. Steve, you want to come talk about special revenue funds?
They're still finalizing those numbers, and we're basically putting 70% out to the campuses and trying to get as much out to the campuses as we have. Then we've got certain other programs that we have to deal with that are required, and then there's the remaining amount that's being allocated by the central staff on a number of issues. But
The
I
biggest,
don't think there's been any major changes in here.
what we have done is we have increased the number of teachers going to class size reductions so we can offset comparability a little bit. So I think we've got about 200 positions there as opposed to 100 or so last year, so,
Do you have a sense for how many schools, similar to the problem that led to the 11 closures, how many schools we feel like we're having to take resources away because of inefficiency and comparability? I mean, how much have we reduced, that pool of schools that I feel like in certain classes has just got, large student-teacher ratios, et cetera, or less resources because of comparability?
we've still got a bunch left. if you're talking about those that are spending well above the average, we still have a number of those that are spending well above the average of the district. In other words, the spread from our highest spending district to our lowest, or highest spending school to our lowest spending school is still way out there. We still got a number that are spending a lot per student. And it's still,
We're still solving it through taking away resources, right?
well, how we're solving it right now is we're using those class size reduction teachers of about 200. That's how we're solving it.
We've got a couple of them that have these TIPS grants that are about $1.5 million a year that last, in some cases, one more year, in some cases two. And there's a couple of high schools, when those drop off, it'll exacerbate the problem.
But it's not really solving it. What we're doing is we're actually spending more, because what's happening at those schools is their core classes are getting so big because we're trying to offer all the electives. We've got to have these class size reduction teachers to keep the class size down so that we have a fighting chance.
Do we have any traveling teachers that split their time between two small campuses so that we can keep the programs going?
We have some.
Quite a few, actually, between counselors, nurses, librarians, and teachers.
Well, I mean, I keep hearing this, I just want to make sure we're still flexible in that way. I mean, when my son started high school, the calculus teacher traveled between 3 schools. And so I hope we still have that kind of flexibility.
We do. In fact, some of our smaller high schools are looking at partnering. Lincoln and Madison, for instance, both have specialized AP classes, but not enough for a full-time teacher, but they could share 2 teachers doing an AM, PM situation. So we're definitely looking at that so we keep the programs going on the campuses.
The savior for some of these smaller campuses is going to be the technology, the bandwidth into the classrooms that will be available a year from now, June 2013, and to be able to then to take some of these teachers and to have a classroom, 100 kids around the district.
Virtual classroom.
Yeah.
So basically, we got about $193 million in special revenue programs. And then you can see kind of how we've allocated it out on the next slide. And then what we're going to do what we're trying to do now is we're trying to finalize this book so then we can build the rest of our budget book like we have every campus in there by every campus with like we had last year. Then we'll have the competency stuff in there. So that's what we're trying to finalize right now. So this is very similar to what we're going to give the board on Thursday, and probably nothing real dramatic will change. And then we're going to start working to fill all the details so that we can adopt it in May. And we're going to try to have most of the details Wednesday or Thursday, but that's not when we need it. The problem is there's just a lot of data to pull together in a very short period of time. We believe we're here last year, and we believe we can get adopted in May and get all these things staffed based on the 1-to-24 ratio. So we've already kind of got that behind us. We got those pools, so everybody knows who they can hire. So we ought to be filling those spots right now so that next year won't be chaotic like last year was during the summer.
Other than what you're doing on the custodial front, are we leaving salary scales alone for now? We talked about the steepness of our salary scales relative to our competitors.
Custodians are what?
All.
For what?
No, I say excluding custodian, because you've already talked about you're going to readjust the salary scale for entering.
Steve, you got that?
We have a proposal. Now, we're freezing it, and our proposal, the structure is pretty simple. I mean, our view is that we will take something that have a curve that is slightly, 1 or 2% higher than our comparison districts and the market and scale it, have a 30-year scale similar to what some of the other districts have. And then we then the tactical part of it is how do you transition to it? It's again, and what we would do is without reducing anyone's salary, we would just move people into the step that their current salary. And then that way it would just run off, and we would ultimately, over time, get back into a rational salary structure.
So a 10-year teacher who's making X, and that X would translate to a 14-year teacher, we pay them to the 14-year
Step.
teacher. And then we
Now,
can-
you can always have something, because you've got years of service, credible years of service, and you got the step, you could actually even take it a step further and hold them steady until their years catch up, or, I mean, there's a lot of variations to that. But again, as you pointed out, I think a month and a half ago, we're at that difference is $100 million.
And we still are working through each campus org, each non-campus org, and we will be making further cuts to those as we go along, so.
And the other thing that jumped out at me also was the one number that we were below the market was at entry-level teachers, which is where we're trying to, teachers at that level, they'll make a decision based over $500 or $1,000. So if we want to get, it's almost, flattened, but
Really,
raise up the-
we should, because of the urban environment, we should have something that's above the average for everybody, and then it just stays that way, and it's a nice.
But didn't we have that a little bit in the stipends that were taken away?
Not really. I mean, the other issues that we're having to address is the master's and PhD stipends, and how to transition away from those into the base salary. And we'll make proposals on that. But again, because everything is frozen this year, we'll probably be in the August timeframe, August and into the fall, because it'll probably take an impact the following year. We need to do something before the legislature acts. They have a habit of sometimes requiring a step increase. We need to get that solidified before that occurs.
So Alan, this will be the second year for no pay increases, is that right, for teachers?
That's correct.
Second or maybe longer, I don't know what y'all did there.
No,
It's the second.
There was a mandated step increase.
$850 a year ago.
In the second. That's correct.
Second.
If I'm reading this right, Alan, as the way comparability stands right now, it's about 19 fewer FTEs this go-around than last year. That's about right? And then what's the percentage difference? I mean, we're looking at like a 96 to 104% spread between the schools, or is it wider than that? Do you have that?
No, I'll have to research that.
Oh, it's 90
to 110.
It's 90 to 110 still? Okay.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
The question is if they change
Our
it.
real problem's going to be is if they ever get around in Washington, No Child Left Behind, they're talking about moving that tolerance to plus or minus 3%.
Yeah, I thought we were trying to narrow that range without just wiping out our magnet programs.
We'd like to, but it's tough to do with the smaller campuses. It's really tough.
The range is still because we still have small school and large school. If we didn't have that category, we'd have a really big spread.
Is there a way, it's just a simple question, is there a way to quantify that just says, here's 230 schools, and based on comparability, this is what we think we're going to spend on those 230 schools this coming year? However, if we could spend what we would want to spend and have all the appropriate ratios so that all schools were equivalent in terms of resources, not efficiency, we would be spending, this much more on these schools, but we can't. So we've got to figure out how to save $300,000 or $500,000. In other words, we're dedicating less resources to certain schools because they're inefficient, because we can only spread that principal or that nurse or that counselor over fewer students. So we got to rob Peter to pay Paul and create, get rid of some electives or create these high core classes in terms of student count. And I'm just trying to figure out how to explain to the board and therefore the community what is the inefficiency across the board that we're having to take out of the system that effectively is if we didn't have comparability, we would have this much more in resources for those.
All you have to do is you go look at that graph that we gave them showing the expenditures per student, and it's a bar graph that shows you how far they are off the average, and you can see, And what we did this time was we picked off the real highest. Still got a big tail that's hanging
I
out
think,
there.
I think the problem I'm struggling with is I still don't feel like the community understands the consolidation rationale. I still think they don't understand that the purpose was to create more resources for those consolidated schools. And we haven't, I personally don't, I'm just saying, speaking out of turn, I don't know that we figured out a way to effectively communicate to the community that by consolidation of those schools, we created X $100,000 more resources that otherwise we would have had to take off because of comparability in Title I.
You can measure the inefficiency in those schools and by the number of classes and by the number of students in the grade level, but in terms of measuring the efficiency, I don't know off the top of my
You're
head.
definitely correct, though. There is, those children will have more services in the consolidated schools than they would have had otherwise. And it is a very difficult thing because of the noise level in school closures. It's hard to get over the noise level to broadcast.
No one hears
what
it.
the benefits are, because nobody cares.
I do think you need to be careful, too, talking about inefficiencies, because I think a lot of times what community folks maybe hear is you're telling me my people aren't working hard, and that's not what you're saying. It's more of like,
Spreading the cost of one principal over 200 kids
Right.
versus
Or
800.
it's staffing. It's staffing.
could we say if every school in DISD had the same exact number of students, then here's what we would spend?
Right. The question is, and the problem is that we've got these, I know we get small and big schools help us in terms of those ratios, but my God, if we go to 97 to 103, from 90 to 110, and we've got, the problem is we don't have cookie cutter schools, you know,
You have to close 20 schools.
and nobody understands that.
They don't. They don't understand because they see that their child, instead of going across the street, is going to have to ride a bus, or they're going to have to get them somewhere. So it's the inconvenience to them that I think that's part of the big obstacle. It's how it affects them personally and their families, because many of them can't get to the different places.
And the next time around, the high schools, if they go to 3%, the high schools,
Are
we will
gonna
have
get
to address high
nailed, yeah.
schools. There's no way around it.
Because they can quantify the cost, i.e. what's it going to mean in terms of inconvenience, and we haven't been able to figure out how to tell them that your kids are going to have much more resources than they would have
It's
otherwise.
harder to quantify.
Well, especially when you look at a reduction of FTEs again, and the public just doesn't understand. You've closed 11 schools, but now you're going to take away 20 more teachers. I mean,
It's also the idea that a school is more than a building, and it's more than a principal and all the rest. There's a community that surrounds it, so people have an affection, they have an emotional, contextual,
Fabric of their
to the whole
community.
thing. So
Of course.
so moving is hard, and change is always hard.
I agree. I mean, I hate seeing schools closed, but I also don't like seeing kids not get the resources that they are entitled to get.
But another thing that we have, because I've done some analysis based on when I asked about transfers, we have kids who live in the attendance zone not attending their neighborhood school.
And they don't, and it's not No Child Left Behind?
Right. They're choosing to go to another school for another reason, and some of those schools are closing. I mean, I could pick one, like Anderson, 490 kids live in the attendance zone, only 400 attend the school. So we've got others, if you look at my list, that are that have that same phenomenon. A third of the kids who live in the Carter attendance zone don't attend Carter. So the marketer, I'm frustrated that we don't publicize our schools. One of the reasons I'm behind a common open house is to prevent more of that. Somewhere in the feeder pattern, kids started deciding they weren't going to matriculate to their neighborhood high school. And what is that? I mean, I can tell the stories in my neighborhood. It's one bad principal that turns off some people, and so then you can bring back in a strong principal, but without any kind of marketing, they're going to continue to vote with their feet and get transfer papers to go to another campus.
Wasn't that kind of also with the option of choice, if you want to go to law or something, you've got one of these two schools? or-
Magnets.
It's more than that?
17,000 kids do not go to their neighborhood school.
Is that number you're quoting?
You're saying they
is
go
that-
to they go to another comprehensive, is what you're saying.
Is that,
Well,
but they're
half
still in
of them-
DISD, or private school?
They're still in DISD, then you've got the people who are at charter schools and magnet schools, but, because we settle, let's see. Okay, 17,000 DISD enrolled students, 96 go to another neighborhood school, 9,600, 7,300 go to magnet schools. Then add on top of that, 11,000 go to charter schools and 18,000 go to private schools. So, you know, when you see campuses that are under capacity, we need to be, I look at this and for instance, you know, pick a school, but why are a third of the kids not going to Carter?
Who live in
Says-
Carter.
Who live in Carter?
And are
You've
enrolled
got-
in DISD.
You've got enough kids. I used to think it was, we need to adjust the attendance zones, we need to, it's part of the cycle of the aging population, the cycle of, you know, you don't have school-age children anymore. And I look at this, and you've got 1,470 kids living in the Carter attendance zone, and only 1,000 are at the school. But I'm just picking on that one because that's the top of the page. I could keep going.
And now you've got DeSoto and Grand Prairie actively marketing and saying, you don't have to leave Dallas, you can live where you live and come to Grand Prairie and DeSoto, but if you're an A or B student. So it gets back to one of the comments we had in the recommendation was, do we have sufficient enough marketing dollars to make sure that we're marketing our schools appropriately in those neighborhoods? Because that's what the competition's doing. And then the second thing is, are we creating enough incentives to that principal to make sure that they're out in the community, that they're engaging parents, so that they know that when that kid shows up and that child shows up and they've got their $41 in their backpack every day, it's going to benefit their school. And right now, I don't know that whether a school is at 90% attendance or 95, the principal feels any accountability or responsibility for engaging the community so that he or she has that attendance level.
But the principal does know that she's getting the money that's available and they're under their control by the number of enrollment, not the ADA, but by enrollment, because we fund them by projected enrollment. So she does know the more students she does enroll, the more money she will receive, which will be under her direct control.
And the, you know.
But it's not all marketing the school.
No, you've got.
There's
what's-
multiple
what's-
things.
No,
There's
it's
multiple
not
things.
marketing.
I had a
Improving the
15
quality of
I-
instruction. I mean,
Right,
it's
I had
lots of things.
15-year-old girls from Carter at the beginning of the school year pleading with me to hook her up with a trustee that could get her out of Carter and into another
It's not
another
marketing.
school.
It's
You know,
it's diagnosing the problem. It could be the programs that are offered there. It could be the management, the leadership, the safety. So it's
It's the metal detectors at the door.
the first thing I said was marketing. You know, it's not that. The school that I'm thinking about in my neighborhood, it started with a new principal who said, we're not going to have scouts here because I don't want to stay late.
So, you hit the nail on the head right there. I think one of the biggest problems I've seen since I've been a trustee, we know which schools are good, and most of us because of the principal being able to embrace the neighborhood and bringing in, making sure they have good teachers. Because I've had a couple of problems in my neighborhood where it was obvious that the principal was not interested in bringing anybody in. So.
Yeah, this particular principal, and he's long gone, but trying to get that community to embrace that school again because they've already considered two other schools their home school.
Yeah.
But his words were, when we tried to get him to do an open house, he said, I have enough kids.
Well, that is a problem. So.
What's the status on high school redesign? Have I, that was an initiative that was, speaking from Woodrow, that Woodrow tried to jump on the wagon before other schools did and redesign themselves and this school choice and things. What's the status right now on where the district stands? Are we redesigning all our high schools still and students can choose to go to any high school in the district they want to on an annual basis?
No, not on an annual basis.
Yeah, but once they go, if they said, no, I don't want to go there anymore, who's going to make them?
Yeah, one of the things relative to high school redesign, it is still ongoing. Each of the high schools is making a decision about what pathway they want to develop for their particular schools. It is not so much to attract other students as much as it is to give an enhanced program for the kids who are there and who live in that neighborhood to attract them to want to stay in that neighborhood. So, did I answer your question?
Well, I was wondering, so you,
Kinda.
you answered it by saying that redesign, the high school redesign is still,
It's still alive and well and moving forward.
Switched
It's
in
not what we
elementary
wanted
school,
to do, but
decided
it
to
is
stay
moving
in that
forward.
feeder.
And
But I think most of the-
We're looking at pathways.
aren't most of the students staying though at their home school? You're not having a huge amount of kids,
But when did they
like from
leave?
my neighborhood, going over to,
No, and you know what we find that when you look at kids go to, my concern would be if they were leaving the district more than whether they're going to another neighborhood school in DISD. And kids do it for, parents do that for a lot of reasons. Child care, like I'm a grandmother, and I know when my grandchild gets ready to go to
Anyway.
school, they're gonna be going to a school in the neighborhood where I live so that they can have after-school care. So there's just a variety of reasons why kids go from school to school within the district. Some of it has to do with the quality of the school, if they think they can get a better education someplace else. Some of it's child care issues. But 17,000 out of 157,000, you probably have within that range anywhere from 50 to 100 different reasons.
High school redesign, though, did take a hit last year when we changed the secondary class size. It made it a little bit more difficult for them to offer the pathways and everything else they wanted to do, so I have heard that concern.
There just weren't enough resources.
my observation is it's expensive. You need to have people with bigger ideas, rather than, people are struggling right now, the faculties are, to manage the higher number of kids, and so then to put sort of a higher order organizational direction, invent the wheel by yourself here, it's a lot to ask given what's happening right now.
Let me ask the question, because, Mike made a valid point, marketing doesn't solve marketing just for marketing's sake. The question is, where we do think we have quality schools with quality outcomes and great placement of kids in college, do we feel like enough people within the city of Dallas understand that for those feeder patterns? I mean, that's what I'm asking.
No, because what it takes is it takes an active, the parent groups are the ones doing all that.
And she and I can talk about, again, schools we're closely familiar with, where you have that historical problem with perception. Gosh, how much would it cost to send a postcard to the neighborhood to say, we've got new leadership? Or we're now offering this program?
Or, X% of our kids got accepted to colleges, and the colleges they got accepted
Right.
included these,
Yeah, I
25
mean,
top 100 schools.
or the simple thing of, you can't imagine how much work it took for me to convince some people a few years ago to put banners on the schools that were recognized and exemplary. Because not every PTA can pay for it.
Seems to me that if you're going to try and, market something, you need to know why people are dissatisfied.
But that's
Otherwise you just, you might not attract anybody,
Yeah,
So you need to ask.
I don't want to walk through a metal detector. We hear that all the time.
That might be, but, and it seems like if, that's the starting point. You got to get a handle on it.
It is. A lot of times they're not
Is it
honest about it.
safety? Is it academics? Is it the office? Is it not a friendly environment? You got to ask.
How many of our families are we talking about when we have these discussions? As far as now, I feel like we're talking to people that have choice. Like, I'm going to choose where I live in Dallas. I don't know how many of our students have that situation where I'm going to choose. My parents are going to choose to move here. So I don't know if
17,000 of them, I went on this path because the other issue is half of them we give transportation and the other half we don't. And that's inequitable in my mind. And it's because I see kids come into my neighborhood high school who are riding DART to get there.
so. Are we marketing? I mean, how many of our schools have
100%.
Yeah, all of them should be.
I went off on this because
Then I kind of
We-
agree with Mike where there's like, there has to be enough core problems more than.
Well, we keep marketing general DISD, and parents make a decision on a feeder pattern. We should be marketing feeder patterns and the outcomes of those feeder patterns. Here's your leadership, here's our college outcomes, here's our programs, here's our extracurriculars. That's what, they don't, this general amorphous DISD, I think is could be better spent dollars, personally, I'm speaking.
Well, 90% of the students can go to pretty much any school they want to at this point.
Because of NCLB.
NCLB. And you're saying that 17,000, so what's that, 11%?
2% are choosing NCLB.
So only 2%.
I'm saying they're choosing for other reasons, and the whole reason I went off on this path is we can talk about what did or didn't go well with the consolidation of 11 campuses. I'm saying there are a whole lot more on the verge, and we're not addressing why those schools' enrollment is declining.
We're still operating as if we're a monopoly, and we're not a monopoly.
And schools take advantage of each other, big time, because when we had a principal fallout situation within our feeder pattern, their group started marketing our neighborhood like that to take our
The
kids.
superintendent of Grand Prairie told me explicitly, I think if a parent exercises choice whether or not they think they're getting a better school or not, it feels they're more invested in it.
Yes.
They exercise choice whether or not makes sense or not, and they're just going to be more bought in to whatever they do. So,
So out of the statistics you have, the 2%, you're guesstimating about 1% of those are being provided transportation by the district, and 1% are finding transportation on their
all the
own.
magnets
Is that-
are being provided.
No, 100% of the magnets and more, depending on how you define a magnet, because a large percentage of kids going to Skyline are getting transportation, and a large percentage of going to, wait, I've got it here, but I don't know if I can read it,
We
but
spend about 20% of our budget transporting kids to magnet schools.
20% of your transportation budget.
It's 25 million.
I mean, I'm loath to not provide transportation to children who want to better themselves and go to a better school, but you could certainly trap them in their feeder programs by not providing transportation. I don't think that's a good solution, but you could certainly save money and force them back into their home feeder patterns. Is that what we really want to do? I mean, my child went to a magnet program, and we used the transportation services that were provided, and had those transportation services not been provided, we'd have gone to a private school. Of course, I'm in a position to be able to do that, thank goodness for my kids. But the transportation made the difference between sending him to a DISD, program and keeping the kid in DISD or not.
But there are kids of much lesser means who are providing their own transportation to go to other schools,
Because it's not a magnet.
and it's not a magnet.
It's not a magnet, no.
Your issue is more the disparity of magnets versus other schools of choice, which are not NCLB driven. The kids. Well, and again, I'll say one comment and go to Susan. I think the one thing we just got to figure out is, when parents are exercising choice and not going to that feeder pattern, okay, there's no, the question is, does the director of that feeder pattern feel that cost somehow in their budget? Because not only are they not getting the revenues in there, but we're actually spending transportation dollars for them to go someplace else because we can't provide a feeder pattern that's attractive to them.
I would say that the secondary principals feel it because I've seen them fight to keep students in their attendance zone because they know that means programs. Like Hillcrest Franklin, there were Franklin parents that felt like there were too many, the enrollment was too high, but the Hillcrest, and so they wanted a boundary change, but the Hillcrest parents were saying, wait a minute, you need to realize that if we decrease our enrollment, we're going to lose, at Franklin, then we're going to lose programs at Hillcrest. But under our current management structure, if you're losing kids because of leadership or whatever at an elementary school, the high school principal has no control over that. And
it'll take 4 years to find out.
Right.
Right. And so what I was going to say too is the recommendation to have a person to organize more by feeder patterns with more vertical, whether it's oversight or just coordination and communication is, I think, really key to a lot of what's going on here because that impacts the community. It makes something like the Choose Woodrow campaign applicable in all the elementary school neighborhoods as well as Woodrow's neighborhood. So it engenders that sort of longer term loyalty and just knowledge and identity. And I think that would make a huge difference, and that will factor in and affect decisions in terms of marketing, but also investment in improving programs. You'll get elementary school families that maybe are willing to look at that high school because you identify the fact that you're not going to Lakewood, you're going to Lakewood, Long, and Woodrow. This is your school, even though it's broken into 3. And so it just, to me, it's a win-win. And if it costs some dollars, I think those would be recouped.
I think you just have to be careful from extrapolating too much from your own experience here.
Certainly,
I think you got to go out and study it and see what.
But certainly also from a piloting program, you could pick 1 or 2 feeder patterns and see whether or not the additional students that come into the feeder pattern as a result of that effort proves that it pays for
Well,
itself, or it doesn't.
And 2 other points on how we further study this. I'd said put in reason codes for when people transfer, and that popped in my head last year when we said, well, kids aren't coming to school until September because, and we were all coming up with reasons. Well, we don't know that that's the real reason why they're not showing up until September 15th. But when a kid shows up late to enroll, we ought to say, why? And plug it in the system and build that reason codes as needed. And likewise, when they transfer in March, right before the standardized test, why are you moving? Why? And so we can track that. But then something else I learned when I was asking our registrar about reason codes is we don't even know your school history. If you or I move, our kids' elementary school is going to show up as where they live now. That the address in the system ties to the elementary school they would enroll in now. The history of where they've been is in the comments. So we can't even do any kind of programming to say how many schools. Maybe it can be done through PEMS or PEM where they were tested. But what she showed me on the
Right, if we're going to start holding these principals accountable, for making sure the parents are happy, we need to give them some tools so they can get some information about this.
And
I mean,
training.
They can
And
collect
training on how to use the
They
tool.
can get anecdotal information, right? But, the folks at Carter need to know why people are not coming to Carter.
And they may have made the decision before they even got to Carter, as she pointed out. They may have made a decision in middle school.
But on marketing, okay, get this off my chest. Happy parents at a high-performing elementary school with great teachers, because their kids score in a certain percentile, we got bombarded with mail, come to the magnet schools. Well, that sends an immediate message that the school you're at's unacceptable.
I don't think it does.
Oh,
but-
it huge
are you
does.
kidding?
The dollars that we, that's why we got on the whole common open house bandwagon, is because we needed pieces of paper to give to our kids to push going to Hillcrest, Franklin Hillcrest, and keep that going, because there are only so many parents that can do all this. And it was great. I'm not saying that your marketing's not good, but it's taking our kiddos. We still have a lot of good things to provide at Hillcrest or W.T. White or Woodrow, wherever it is. And we just, and I'm just saying that from my experience. Carter probably does too. I mean, we made a DVD at Franklin just to try to show, because all of our schools have great things to offer, but not everybody has the dollars to market towards coming to their school. And so we're getting them snapped up before they even come over for open house.
I'm conflicted on it because I believe in choice. You don't want to trap people in a low-performing school, but it boggles my mind that we've spent all these years telling people in strong schools that now you can go to a magnet school, and then, half the PTA leaves, and we wonder what happened to parent engagement?
Okay.
So, I don't know where this leaves us, Todd, but, I mean,
Just
I
a
think
little
those are
bit,
good
a little bit
suggestions.
up
I
his
think-
chest.
I think we need to know what, we've embraced, to a certain extent, with high school redesign and these other things, the district has embraced choice. I think that's a good thing. I think, the kids are the beneficiaries of that, right? And I think to the extent, I'm not sure who said it, to the extent people get involved in making a choice. They become more invested in that school, whether it's, Woodrow or Hillcrest or Barack Obama. But,
But
And if you take it to its logical conclusion too, really what we want is for every kid every day to choose to go to whatever school they're going to. If every high school kid walked into the building that day and said, I choose to be here today, we'd be way ahead. So if we could, from the top down and the bottom up, make that choice thing something where we're wanting to choose, we want you to choose Hillcrest because we got these great programs, or we want you to choose the magnet school because you are so focused on this. But make choice part of everybody's days.
Bruce?
Doesn't a parent have to go in and sign a child out when they move them to another school? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so do we not,
If they stay within DISD, right?
right, but then so
Any-
do we not interview these parents to get feedback?
No.
I mean, it would be pretty simple, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. It's done, I can speak from experience, it's done other places. There's an exit interview.
Well, maybe that's something we need to look, I mean, that isn't going to cost us anything.
I think with a lot of this too, you have to have the parents to be involved in it, because when they were doing some of the satellite magnet campuses, I'm not sure that the parents had a whole lot of feedback in there, and they chose this particular campus is going to have this. Well, did they talk to the kids to see if that was what they would want to go to or any of that? A lot of times those choices are made for them, and this is what we're going to offer. And had it been something else where they'd had some feedback into that, it could have been something different and more might have stayed.
I think they have to look at what those teachers and what the success rate is of those schools. I know that's what we did when we were trying to figure out our pathway, was, a way to keep the teachers we had and what their strengths and weaknesses were. So it's, because they'd all love to, pick being police officers or cartoonists or computer programmers, but you've got to pay for all that.
Well, I would guess that the engaged parents are embracing choice, and that a good, strong percentage of those 2% that are making those choices are engaged parents, so.
But it's more than 2%. Oh, never mind.
So, but I agree, we need to, I think the district should make a concerted effort to focus on the feeder patterns and market those feeder patterns. It's common sense to me. It builds neighborhood cohesion and,
Camaraderie.
it's just a lot of good things.
Too much sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Before, we've hijacked your discussion. Are you finished?
Do you think the marketing comes before just the general, work to try to improve? Or, is it top down? It seems like marketing is your top down, whereas you could be going bottom up and trying to figure out why people are moving and then change that situation as opposed to.
I think you got to do both. We're
Because
behind.
most of the people in it know why everybody's leaving.
It really doesn't matter how much marketing you do. If you don't have a good principal, it's not going to be worth anything. And if the Star Commission recommended organizing vertically. If we reorganize vertically, give the principal authority to do what he wants to do, then give every coach, every band director. If we're competing, you go to the charter schools, they can't compete with us when you look at what we have extracurricular activities. You go look at Flower Mound Marcus and you go see that band, there's nobody's going to go over there to
practicing the
charter
same
school to
songs
do
in
that. If you want to go
seventh
play football, you're going to go there. And that's what we got to do. You got to give coaches, you got to give band directors, give choir directors, you got to give them responsibility for the entire feeder system along with the principal, and then you'll build it back one school at a time. Like you go over to Knight Elementary School, that guy's got the whole community involved. So that's what we got to do at every school. You got to get a good principal at every school. Then the principal will rebuild it, and then you get a good high school principal to make sure the feeder patterns go in the right direction, and then it markets itself. The people that are marketing are those that don't have a very good product to market. Grand Prairie, who's going to go to Grand Prairie? You think anybody's going to leave Louisville to go to Grand Prairie? You think, you know,
Well, but isn't the core to all of that a curriculum that is substantially a higher bar than we have set for our norm here in the ISD? I mean, it seems like the choice that most engaged parents make are to schools that have not necessarily more sports or more band, but a greater educational, a commitment to intellectual education, a less commitment to tests.
the problem we have is like the charter schools, if you take a child to a charter school, the parent wants that kid there, so they have a strong deal of parent involvement because the parent wants a kid there. When you come to a public school, not all the parents want to be there. So what we've got to do is we've got to engage them through extracurricular activities. Kids that are involved in band and athletics and all those extracurricular activities, whatever you want to do, they're going to do better in school. So we got to get them involved in that enough so that it offsets the lack of parent involvement that we have. Because, you go to charter school, the parents are involved all the time. So we got to use what we have, the strength that we have. We got to use those extracurricular activities that they don't
Alan,
have.
you're absolutely right. The only thing is, again, you've got to have the right principal in there that wants these people in there.
They've got to be welcomed.
And I have a question
All
about,
principals.
And you're right, and it increases retention and graduation rates and everything else. That's absolutely.
I mean, it's pretty easy. Just get a good principal, everything else.
Well, I know, but we've had some good principals, after a fallout. It just takes a lot to build that back up. It's not as easy as that.
I have a question about the focus on the principal, because I know from talking to Mike Morath and some other people, and from seeing things like in this document, and there's been a lot of talk in this last year about principals being the key focus to the solution to the problems that we're seeing. Is that really radically different than where we've been 6 years ago? Is our approach to what we're doing about that different than it was 6
Principal's
years?
always been the key to the success of a campus, because they get good teachers and they can make it work.
So are we
Regardless of
doing,
what's going on at the top, this is my opinion, well, regardless of what's going on at the top of the organization, if you have a good principal at a school, that principal is going to be successful.
so is DISD in the process of doing something differently than we did 5 years ago and 10 years ago
don't
to
know.
get and retain
Are we,
good
Shirley?
teachers, principals?
What we're looking at is retaining the very best ones we have, trying to train up those who have the capability of having capacity, and then trying to recruit and hire those that we can. We have to understand that across this country, the issue of leadership at the principalship level is critical, because folks are not going into education. And so for me, the critical thing is to weed out the really, really bad folk who either don't have the capacity to do better or don't care to do better, and then try to build capacity with those who really want to but just need some leadership. It's not as easy as just going out with, okay, we can get rid of all the bad principals and then we can hire all these really good ones.
Right, 'cause there's a big inventory.
If we could do that, we would have done that.
Right.
I just think
So it's about building capacity and having a very strong leadership development program. And for me, it's getting folks who have the heart for kids, who want to do what's best for kids, who know how to build collaboration with staffs, building capacity in their teachers. Are we working towards that? That was your question. The answer is yes.
No, I'm asking, are we doing it differently than we've been doing it? Because if we think we've been trying hard to do it, but we haven't got there and we keep doing it the same way we did 5 years
That's called
ago.
insanity.
Right, so are we doing it differently?
I think we're trying to do it differently.
We were given a presentation on the Aspiring Principals program, and that looked like that's something brand new for the district, and it also looks like it's working.
It is working. Next year, we're going to start an aspiring assistant principals program, because what we discovered is that when we tap that small group, we pulled those from the assistant principalship. We didn't have anything to backfill the assistant principals. We have some very strong leader teachers who are very, very capable. Many of them want to go into administration, would do an outstanding job. And then, so we're going to start the Aspiring Assistant Principals program this year. You'll be hearing more about that. We've got about 30 teachers identified already who can backfill these positions. Because it is about building your own pipeline. We've got to build our own pipeline of great leaders.
How do they get into those programs? Sorry. How are they selected to be those aspiring principals or assistants?
Assistant principals, what we asked for was from principals and EDs to look at those teachers who already exhibit those leadership qualities. And one of the criteria was that they already had their administrative certification or 6 hours away from it. And that's how we chose the 30. Because we wanted to get it off the ground and then we can do an application process. Because if they've already got their certification and are working towards it, we know they have an interest in going into campus administration.
The other thing that jumped out at me when I looked at this salary scale was that not only did we have a slightly lower starting salary than the market, but in terms of what we were paying our average positions across the board, the one where we were closest to paying market, which was like right at, maybe less than 1% more, was probably the most important position across all of them, which was principals. We were paying, our average teacher was 8% more than market, 41% more than market for aides. Principals were 0.6% more, and that was the most important position. If I was going to be overpaying for anything, if we're getting the right principal, it was that position.
Yeah, we have to be the highest paying principal district in the state, because we got to be able to still them and keep them.
And also put them back into the classroom occasionally so that they don't lose touch with where they came from, especially if they come up from teacher ranks. Because you can get divorced from the reality of the classroom in a few short years, and all of a sudden you have a disconnected principal again. So.
Okay, why don't we, I want to keep us on schedule, why don't we at least make a valiant effort for the next 35, 45 minutes, okay, to talk about this memo that hopefully everyone's got it. We've had it around for a couple of weeks. I'm happy to go point by point with this group. If there's any recommendation that people feel.
65.
But we've got to start bringing closure to this memo to send to the board, and so I'd love people's thoughts on what we have here. You want to just go point by point? Is that fine with you? Okay, point number one, benchmark salaries and staffing ratios against peer districts annually. Here we're just making the point that our salaries seem out of whack and relative to the market. Anyway, just welcome comments or thoughts on what I've said here, what we've got here.
I agree with it.
Is there anyone that wants to make any meaningful changes or take it out?
Well, I don't agree with it, but I don't have any specifics. The copy that I'd written on, I don't have here with me. But I don't think any of the districts have to go through what people in Dallas ISD have to go through, especially with the current situation we're in right now. And if any of you have ever been in the classroom, you know what it's like to be in the classroom in a large urban district. If you haven't been, you might have been in schools, but you don't go through the day-to-day operations that these people go through. And there might be a gap, but I don't think anybody really understands what happens in the classrooms and in the campuses and at these positions to say that they're overpaid. It just, I can't see that.
The conclusion that this was drawn from was a fairly robust set of data that came from chase groups from,
Houston, Garland, Mesquite, Richardson, Carrollton's, Farmer Branch.
That essentially were
Houston's the only one
spending,
closest to us.
they were essentially spending their money more wisely to get a bigger bang for the educational buck. In other words, they were spending less money but getting higher student achievement, which seems to me to be the goal that we should be aiming for. And, one of the conclusions was that the pay structure was substantially different among this chase group than DISD. And $110 to $130 million over X number of years is a target to aim for. I mean, even if it's only 8% of that, if we initiated some sort of a salary cap and increase incoming teachers the first year, we're still looking at maybe a $10 million savings the first crack out of the bat. That cannot be a bad thing. It aligns us. It makes us spend the money smarter. I think it's they're using a portfolio analysis program that's really common in a lot of other industries, and it just makes a lot of sense to look at our Chase group and say, they're doing something right. Maybe we ought to take a look at what they're doing and see if we can align ourselves a little bit better. And by aligning ourselves better, we make ourselves more competitive in the marketplace, theoretically.
I would say, I don't think the intent from my perspective is simply to match it to what's necessarily being paid elsewhere.
That's not the point here. The
The
point
key is we need to be competitive, but we shouldn't overpay because it means fewer teachers in the classroom. I mean, everything else being the same, kids are suffering right now because we have, student-teacher ratios are just way too high.
Absolutely.
And so it would be foolish of us to pay the state average, right, if it cost us quality teachers, right? So I think we need to be competitive just as we do for principals. But at the same time, we'd be foolish not to, which is what the recommendation says, I think, is to look at how we stand relative to our peers and ask the question, are we paying?
I think the key thing to address your point, Rena, is that we should benchmark ourselves against peer districts, and we should absolutely look at our involuntary turnover. If teachers are leaving because they don't think they're being paid fairly for the salaries that we offer, then that's going to show up in involuntary rates. But we have one of the lowest turnover rates among the 30th largest districts in Dallas, Tarrant, and Collin County. Involuntary. I mean, voluntary and involuntary, add them together. So I think your point is valid that if no one wants to basically have a salary scale that means we lose good teachers, period, paragraph.
Sure.
So I'll suggest adding to that we also track involuntary turnover to see how many teachers that we wanted to keep and we lost.
If you look at the schedule right now, if you paid at a 2.5% above market, you're looking at adding 1,500 teachers for the same amount of money into the process. And that would make an enormous difference.
Planning periods would free up. Anyway.
And by the way, it takes, there is no intention of cutting anybody's salary.
No, it's just frozen, right?
But it could be frozen. It's up in the air as how we do that tactically. But it would definitely, everybody goes into this step that they were slotted for, and then we have to decide how they grow from there. But, so it takes a while to get that. It's going to take 10, 15 years to add those teachers back into the district.
And I had a conversation with Trustee Morath last week on this very issue, and he doesn't see this as a long-term solution because in his mind, he wants to see teachers paid $110,000 a year. And the way we're structured right now, we ain't going to get there. But in the meantime, this is not a stupid way to go. This makes a lot of sense until we can somehow revamp the system so that we make teachers in the United States a sought-after position.
That making all those teachers should make $100,000, but that's way beyond our control.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So you have some trustees that don't support this idea long-term.
Right.
But short-term,
It's hard to argue against benchmarking and understand where you stand relative to your aspirational peers.
Well, can you factor in all of the other variables?
We should have a premium to be in a large urban district like this, but the question is, what's the premium? Is it 2%? Is it 1%? Is it 5%? What does it take? I just think the irrationality of the way the curve looks is what's crazy. It looks like it was, some drunk design. It really doesn't make any sense. It's not fair to the teachers from year to year.
Well, teachers for years have never known what they're going to make the next year because of the way they either freeze the step, they freeze the salary, they know what they're supposed to get, but it's never been that way. I know in the 26 years I taught, you never knew what you were going to make the next year because they would either increase the salary step schedule or they would move your steps to where you stayed on the same step 10 years, or it was an absolute nightmare. So nobody can ever plan what they're going to make for the next year. And now with cost of living increases, higher class sizes, teaching longer days, teaching more number of class periods and all of that, why wouldn't they go to somewhere that's smaller where they don't have to deal with that?
But they're not.
Some of them are, but some of them can't because they're stuck and they can't afford to leave because they would make less. And they're stuck, they can't.
I think all we're saying here is let's just be informed. You know, we're competing for teachers, we're competing for talent, and we're at the same time, we're constrained by having to deliver a quality education. You can't do that with fewer teachers. So,
Well, we're doing it pretty well because we're still cutting.
we want to be informed about.
Sure, and I
We
agree.
don't find ourselves in a situation where we have custodians that are paid, so much more.
Rena, to be fair, you say we're still cutting. If we paid the average salary, we'd be able to hire 1,463 more teachers.
If they would come.
If they would come. But I'm just saying that, it's a part of the fact that we haven't been managing our cost structure appropriately is in fact costing us less teachers in the classroom.
Do we know where we stand
We're
next
paying
to
fewer
Houston?
teachers more.
Do we know where we stand next to Houston? Entry-level salary and then just how to this that process?
We've got all that data. I think we've shared that with you, but we can
you did.
we can give you that again.
Are we higher?
Send it
I
around.
don't need them. Are we higher? No, we're on entry level. We're lower.
On the front end and
It's
higher
right.
on the back end.
Alan's going to bring it, we saw it earlier. It's hard to see in black and white, but
Sorry to pick up.
We must have saved at least 14 cents.
The numbers in this benchmark
This is us in
in
red.
your notes are 2009 numbers. I have Houston's 2012, 2011, 2012 salary right here, and they're making more than we are now. Or at least the person that's on the, it looks like it's a little bit more than us. So I agree with you that we need to benchmark, but we need to benchmark
12 salary
current year's, not
schedule.
3 years old numbers.
We need to benchmark the most current information we have.
Yeah, because I mean,
And the administration can make these salary changes without trustee approval, is that correct?
I don't know if we can or not.
No.
I don't know if it changes when you change the state, but I know like California. This is way above California starting. For at least LA and Oakland. So
It's pretty expensive to live
the
there.
cost of living is extremely ridiculous in LA.
And they're collective bargaining.
Okay, well that's a factor that I'm just.
Well, I mean,
When we
it
benchmark, I would even
costs-
say we
it
should
costs
benchmark against.
Almost $19,000 a student to educate a kid in New York City. And we're spending $7,500.
Yep. Okay, let's move on to point 2. Empower principals to make budget and staffing decisions at the campus level. This is not something that we're doing today. This is not something I think you've recommended in this forthcoming budget. This is more of a long-term down the road. We talked, I guess, Steve, you were the one that said that Houston, this is what Houston does. So comments, feedback on this point.
How did they train their principals to be budget people instead of
Took them
educators or
about 4 or
both?
5 years to make the transition. And
Training's needed.
they've got basically 3 times the budget staff that we've got. So there's a cost to it.
Do their principals
And they've
have to go
also-
through a training, a
Well, you know
continual
what they
training
did
to
is
learn?
They put business managers, professional business managers out in the campuses to help them with that. A degree in each high school, or basically each high school, so that there's a degreed accountant, business person that's out there helping the principals support this.
But to be fair, the issue right now is a campus gets FTEs based on the number of students, and whether that FTE is a 20-year FTE costing X or a 1-year FTE costing Y, the principal bears no burden
That's right.
for that decision.
And
That's not reality.
That is definitely a major decision for a principal in Houston as to the experience level of teachers. Because that means that if they hire experienced, the more tenure they have, the fewer teachers they get.
Except that this year, when teachers leave, if they replace a high-paid salary with a low-paid salary, we cost shared with them.
That's helpful, but in this model, they would get all of it, I think. And that's what I've seen.
Well, they give each principal $3,200, I believe, a student, and, that's their choice who they hire.
But this also helps comparability.
Yes. In some regards, yes, absolutely. Doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Because how do we measure? We stay in compliance not with FTEs, not with dollars,
No,
because we
do
get
it
blown
with
away on
FTE.
dollars.
We do it with FTEs.
Depending on which
We
we choose to do
That's another
FTEs.
proposed change is No Child Left Behind.
is to go to dollars and get rid of FTEs.
So
So
Steve, is there a decline in tenured, experienced teachers in Houston? Are you
Mike,
aware?
I can't tell you that, Mike. I don't know. I don't know whether their non-renewal rates are higher than ours and always have been. So I don't know if their evaluation process takes that into account. I suspect that's what happens. I don't know.
You know, if I was a principal and was trying to make my dollars stretch, I might be choosing less.
Well, you're putting them in a tough, you're putting principals in they're held accountable, but they're in a tough position. The principal can even have a choice at the high school whether he has a football program or not, or a soccer program. So substitute a soccer program rather than a football program.
We need to get our HR department cranked up and get a new batch of principals in, because this is not really workable right now, unfortunately.
Make any sense?
It did.
You know, when the new HR person gets in and implements the Star Commission recommendation, that's the key to turning everything around. So,
Could we ease into it by changing FTEs to match the salary scale? Like if you make less than 50, you're a .75 FTE, and if you make more than 65, you're a 1.25 FTE, and then the median is 50 to 65 is 1.
eased into it, but I think it'd be difficult to explain, and that, I think the way we're easing into it right now is going to be, help us out a little bit, because they'll start focusing on what they are paying, and then you may be able to take the next step, which I was doing in Louisville, which allocating it. When we made reductions to the budget, we said you're going to have to reduce X amount of your budget, and gave it to them in that fashion too. So right
The
now, I
average
think
principal-
it's just baby steps. It takes an amazing amount of time to make any progress.
Is there anyone that wants to alter this or take this out, or are people happy leaving this in as a goal, as a longer-term goal?
Are you going to organize the
Yes.
recommendations into?
Short-term and longer-term? Yep,
It's longer term.
yep. Okay, so I'll leave it in and move it to a long-term section. Okay? We talked about this principal leadership training. This basically is saying that we try and expand this program, given how important that our principals are to our district. Shirley mentioned moving to the assistant principal program as well, but I don't know what funds you've already allocated in the budget here, but I think it was the belief of many of us that if we could expand this program, and we're not doing it in the current budget, then let's do so. Do I have any?
Money in the budget for next year for the aspiring principals program.
Say that-
Assistant principals program.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
We have funding for
You-
the aspiring assistant principals program for the budget next year.
And what about the principals program?
Oh, yeah, we're continuing
So
that.
give me a sense, do you have a sense for how many principals next year we intend to train through those two programs?
You're talking for the aspiring principals program?
Yes, ma'am.
We already got, the next cohort would be cohort 3, and there are 18 in that cohort for next year.
And how many do you anticipate for the assistant principals program?
30.
So that means we have about 45 total principals that are either online or being trained through that aspiring program. Is that right? It's been
For
about
next
15 a year.
Yeah, this is cohort 3 that we're going into for the aspiring principals program.
And so that first cohort's already in the classroom this year, correct? Or are they moving into already in the principalship?
Most of them are, not all of them got a principal.
Is that a big enough program for the principals program, Alan?
Yeah, for right now it is, and we will expand as we have to. The biggest need right now is at the assistant level.
Are you finding that you train a lot of these people and then they leave the district that don't get selected?
We've had 3 that left because they didn't get selected. Yeah, but that's
small.
part of the cost of the business.
The reason I ask this is that thinking about the new teacher evaluation system,
Yes. we're talking about
one
that.
of the great points of anxiety among teachers is, are the principals that we have in position today, qualified to do evaluations, capable of doing, evaluations? And I don't have a way to assess that myself, but I can, as well as I do, that that's a huge concern out there. So that, when I hear that, and that says we need to have a bigger principals development program.
But let me answer that by saying it two ways. One is the training of principals who are already in the role. I mean, that's a large part of what we need, that we are doing too, is training those who are already there, as well as building the pipeline through the aspiring principals programs to fill the positions as they become open. And that's when they come open either because folks retire, or they resign, or they're terminated.
But I think the new teacher evaluation system takes a little bit out of the principal's hand because, X% of it's going to be quantitative and not objective.
Yes, but if I could.
Be in the design, though, is comparing the qualitative to the quantitative on a by-principal basis.
Yes,
That
agreed.
somebody is getting, and you will be able, over a period of time, you'll be able to bring those two into line, so that that the qualitative, the quantitative that is based on kids' achievement, and the qualitative start to get closer in line. Right now, qualitative is skewed in a little bit.
But if I could just say, so more is going to be expected of teachers, right? If your principal doesn't help you sufficiently, or whoever is supposed to be helping you identify how to get better, that's a very frustrating experience. So, you're being held accountable. Okay, I think teachers are embracing that idea. What they're fearful of is that they're not going to be, the qualitative side won't be good, and the help in terms of how do I get better won't be good.
I think a part of that, and I hear you and I would agree to that, but I think a part of that on the qualitative side is having the content experts who are also going to be in assessing teachers and helping to identify those areas of need, and then cycling back to provide that assistance, either from the principal side of the house or the content expert side of the house. So, that is what the design.
And I think that's a good feature of what seems to be in the current thinking, is it's not just the principal that's in. I think that's important.
Okay. One other thing on this particular thing, some of the comments that I've heard are, what's scary, you were talking about the fears that teachers have, is that who are the people training these people? And what we hear right now is that there are a lot of people that they don't feel like are qualified to be training other principals, yet these are the ones that are going to be coming back up. They're getting the same training that these people that they don't feel like are really qualified to be the people training new principals. And I don't know what the AP program will look like, probably pretty much the same.
It's based on the New York model that we're using, the aspiring principals program for.
Rita, how would you amend it?
I don't know really how to amend it, but the problem that has been communicated to me is the quality of the people that are doing the training. We're going to get more of the same. And that's not what we're really looking for, because that's an issue to some degree.
See, I don't think that's true.
Well, I know one of the people that I saw in it, I was like, and she's training other people? But that was a personal thing for me, because I just don't think she does a very good job. But I don't have that say.
Yeah, well, but we value your input, certainly. But what I was going to say was, as we look at the principals who have come out of the Aspiring Principals program, they are doing an outstanding job, and some of our top performers right now, who build, understand collaboration, who know their content, who know instruction. These are some very strong folk who are out there now.
Shirley, are principals, are they quartiled, are they ranked in any sort?
Yes.
So maybe what we could do is make part of this is that to basically start tracking the graduates and understanding that of people who've gone at what percent are in X quartile, X quartile, X quartile, so we get a sense for the quality, you know, as
Yes,
basic.
yes, we can easily do that, but yes, we do rank them by quartiles. And have a grow or go policy for that bottom quartile.
Yeah, 'cause with Steve's comment about the quantitative data matching with the subjective evaluations, you're going to eliminate those built-in sort of cronyistic tendencies. But to Rena's point, any kind of management program, you know, if you crank out 10 candidates as you know, junior managers, 2 or 3 are going to do, you know, far exceed expectations, and 3 or 4 are going to be okay, and 2 or 3 are going to be little Nazi micromanagers. I mean, it's any program, any management program really can't protect against that trait of personality that happens when all of a sudden you're given power and it goes to your head. And I've seen it in management programs that I've both been in and have managed. So,
Is there a safeguard that'll be built in? I've seen just once the newer model of the revision of the principal evaluation system. I just think people want to be assured that if they're not really effective, they're not going to stick around in that position. They may have to go back to the classroom or whatever, but they're really fearful.
well, you know, we're along the way of having a pretty good whack at a teacher evaluation program, but I agree. I mean, we really have to have a strong principal evaluation program, and not just pay lip service to principals are going to be evaluated on building their teams and you know, have student data as the only outcome, because principal can make a teacher's life miserable and have morale be hugely low, and yet student achievement may actually increase, you know, over that period of time. So I don't know how that principal evaluation has worked
So it
in.
doesn't work that way.
It usually doesn't, but you know, it's.
Well, if you have a little bit more,
Nothing wrong with that, if it works that way, but it doesn't work that way.
if you have principal empowerment a little bit too, I mean, how long has the district been passing the trash? And that's gone on too with assistant principals. And there are several principals that don't get to pick their assistants.
Right.
And then that's how it all comes back and it's judged, you know, based on the principal.
Part of this effort, and Alan and I have talked about this, is having a more concerted effort to recruit principals from outside the district. I mean, you want to have a situation where you organically grow as much as possible, but sometimes you're just not going to be able to find the quality of what you want within your confines.
You have to make those lateral hires. You have to. So.
We have stopped
Right.
that process.
Right, which is good. Well, we hope. But also, we have to get rid of the good old boy plopping your best friend in as a principal, because
Or
I
girl,
went-
as the case
girl,
may be.
yes, exactly, because I was the right with that.
Okay, well, I'll work on some wording on that and submit it back to the group, but I think that would be a short term versus the one above it. Okay, custodial services, I'm going to rework this based on what you outlined in the budget in terms of what is going to be done. This will become a long term. That's something that we may recommend they look at again if the current solution that you propose doesn't work, to revisit again. Number 5, feeder pattern. Implement the vertical alignment of schools by feeder pattern. Thoughts?
Love it.
Yeah, me too.
Anyone opposed?
Now, Sherry, why'd you look over here? I think you're asking an extremely astronomical amount of a principal. They can barely do what they're supposed to do right now. And for them to be responsible for a whole feeder pattern with the hiring and all that, I just don't think that we have the capability to do that, and to not only manage your own campus, especially for those high school campuses, those huge campuses, to be able to do that for the middle and all the 2 or 3 middles, and then all of the elementaries. We don't have that many super women or supermen that can do that, and I think you're just asking for failure before you even start doing something like that.
I think it's a change of their responsibilities, and I see it as a promotion, and that more of the responsibilities that we put on principals right now then goes to the assistant principals. And that I feel like that they're in a disadvantage under the current model because they receive the students in ninth grade and they're immediately held accountable for the performance of those students, but they've had very little influence on what's happened before they got there.
Same way with the teacher.
Well, so you're giving the principal then can see that my ninth graders are deficient in a content area, and then if they have the right data, which they don't have right now, they can go back and tie it to, well, gosh, X% of them weren't even in my feeder pattern, or they were, and what school did they come from, and I need to go work with that principal.
You know, I would look at it this way. I mean, we've always had, you know, learning communities, and we've had management, but it's really been away from the campuses, right? And this shift is really just pushing that stuff down to the campus level, on the front lines, where people are living with parents and living with classroom issues and living with, you know, they didn't learn the right math in 8th grade or not ready for high school. I think this would be a huge improvement in that. I'm not sure it's a budget matter, but I really think it's just doing it differently. We've always had management, right? We've had people like Mr. Williams.
Right, I get that.
So we're just saying, let's align that.
I'm just saying to ask them to be responsible for their own campus and all of the others.
You know what, I would tell you, I don't think they have to be, because if we have 22 feeder patterns, let's say we pay them $150,000, I don't know what the right number is. If you pay them somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000, that's $2.2 to $3.3 million to have 22 senior directors, managing directors, whatever you want to call them, and there is a high school principal reporting. I mean, I would argue, Alan and I spoke to it, I would have that the high school director, the middle school director, and the elementary school directors report to the person overseeing that feeder pattern. So they'd have 7, 8, 9 direct reports. They don't have day-to-day responsibility for the high school campus. The high school principal has it.
That's different, okay.
I agree, and to me, it's a cost of $3 million out of a budget of $1.5 million to have, I mean, these are, my God,
$1.5 billion.
$1.5 billion, I'm sorry, thank you.
Yeah, it's a logical program that way, the management flows correctly that way. I mean, it's the way a small business would operate in terms of.
You also, if you focus on what the discussion around the marketing program, you're marketing a feeder pattern. So why not, you should be organized in a feeder pattern. It gets the management closer to the parents.
Well, exactly, and that upper level manager might be able to solve parental problems before it escalates into something more as well. So there's a lot of benefits. I can see the principals being able to, look up to those directors as more mentors and, provide.
You need to have strong central controls over budgetary controls once you allocate the money to make sure that the principal's doing right. Make sure that your teacher evaluation system and the principal evaluation system and the student achievement, that you have all of that being monitored centrally and the principal's doing his job, just leave him alone.
What's an average high school principal make in DISD? On average, there's a range, but what's the average?
90 to 100.
This also philosophically goes back to what the customer is a person that goes from K through 12. Right. So if you're looking at refocusing down to the bottom line.
Would it be okay if we recommended that we actually have a senior person that oversees all, including, it isn't necessarily just an expansion of duties for the high school principal, but there's actually a person overseeing all of it?
Yeah, say that this is an additional person in the feeder pattern that.
Well, I mean, maybe it's just leave in Miles some flexibility to put some additional resources in to reflect the increased responsibility of the management structure.
Would it be a requirement to have consistency throughout the district?
On what?
Well, say a parent decides that we have to move from this place to another part of town, would the quality of the consistency be enough?
Where we went to managed instruction because of our mobility rate.
Right.
We want to retain managed instruction as long as we have high mobility rate. You don't want to have one curriculum model that,
Oh,
And-
yeah, I agree, yeah, we have to consistent.
Because we have a
curriculum
lot of
model.
inconsistencies right now across the district.
Managed instruction, we
Yeah.
do.
but prior to
Appreciate
managed.
Steve's suggestion, because, while I agree with this totally, it's really not a budgetary matter, except to the extent we need resources there. So I
But it
think,
mirrors the Star Commission.
pardon me, Bruce?
It mirrors the Star Commission.
Well, right, but, I don't really, okay.
Do you still have area directors over these other managers?
Well, if you had 22, and I haven't figured out how to deal with, this is Superintendent Miles, but if you've got 22 feeder patterns, I think one of the things the Star Commission is that we had 4 regional superintendents, if I remember right, 2 in the elementary level and 2 in the secondary level, overseeing 230 principals. So each of them had a responsibility of almost 50 to 60 principals. Is that right, Shirley? Under the old model?
Too many direct
You have
reports.
3 secondary and 4 elementary, so you have a total of 7, and that's about right.
So each of them had 30 responsibility.
You're averaging somewhere between 34 and 44.
So their comment was that's just not a span of control is way too broad. So it seems like you would still have to have, because you can't have 22 of them reporting to superintendent.
And we need to go back to a more vertical alignment by feeder patterns anyway in these EDs, so it just makes sense to.
So Todd, you're talking about then taking that model away and going to this model, so you wouldn't have the area directors plus this.
The area directors would oversee multiple feeder patterns.
You may not
So
have
you would have
7, you
to
may
add
have.
costs.
They have four.
You wouldn't be saving any, but you wouldn't take that away and just go to this. So you'd be adding this 3 million on top.
But I think you think you'd be reducing what you were spending on the area superintendents, because now each of them oversees, say, 6,
They should be able to manage it better.
much better. Yeah.
By the way, this model will cost more. It will cost more.
It's okay.
That's okay.
Sure, but it's a minor
more
cost.
efficient.
Existing model is not necessarily doing the job.
Shirley.
I was going to say,
Oversee them if they're not doing their job.
Shirley.
I was going to say, remember that the current model is horizontal, and that you have all the elementaries together, and then all the middle schools, and what you're talking about is going to the model that we did previously, which I personally endorsed, and that is feeder patterns being together.
Yes, ma'am.
I thought we saw a lot more growth under that model.
Okay. All right, so I'll work on this again and submit it around. Okay. Bye, Susan. Let's do 15 more minutes of this, okay? Strategic initiatives to improve attendance. Here, I think we're just trying to make sure people understand what's going on from an attendance standpoint. You've raised the point about are there certain investments that we could be making in truancy programs or parental engagement programs, stressing the importance of continued attendance that can more than pay for themselves if we could just make sure that people understand the importance of being at school. So this was a suggestion, and we added the extracurricular programs, making campus staff feel more accountable for daily attendance. And Jim, on this point, you think that they do? Do we go to principals and say, you budgeted, you're going to be at 96%, and you're coming in at 94, what's going on?
No, I don't, we provide to them the numbers. Now, I don't know whether or not upper management really concentrates on that. I don't think that they do. But what I'm saying is, I think that the issue was whether or not they had an incentive to go out into the community and bring in students financially, and they are aware that they receive their budget based on their enrollment, not on attendance, but on actual enrollments, because the enrollment, we take what we call a snapshot date, which is in October, and we say whatever your enrollment is, because we're assuming that that's going to be the highest enrollment for a particular school, and therefore they'll receive the maximum dollar amount in their base allocations.
So let's just devil's advocate. Let's say in January comes around and their attendance has fallen below what they should be based on October. Are there are there consequences? Do we take resources away?
No, we do, what we do is, we're doing the enrollment a year in advance, like we've already determined what the enrollment is. And come October, what we will do is we will do a settle-up. So if the enrollment is what it was forecasted to be, then they'll keep their money. If it's more than what was forecasted, then in fact they would get more money. So if they went out in the community and they brought in, say, 100 more, then they would, in October, they would get more money. Now, if they didn't make enrollment, there is a reduction in their base allocation. This last year, we took away 50% of what we gave them. So let's say for each student, we gave them $100, one less. That means they only got to keep $50 of it. The other 50 we took back.
This is a tricky problem, I mean, I think Todd's trying to figure out a way to give the principals an incentive, right? But, if the principal doesn't do the job and you take money away from the campus and the kids are suffering.
Yeah, you heard the kids, you don't.
Yeah.
But that's why we only take 50% away. Because remember, we're giving a base allocation based on an enrollment projected ahead of time.
Well, said differently, I guess the question is, could we, on a piloting basis, could we look at our lower enrollment schools and provide additional resources and say, if we gave you this for truancy programs or parental engagement programs, and could we see whether or not there was an increased attendance rate?
We can do whatever you would like to do, and we certainly can track it. So the answer is yes.
Just so you know, as part of the campus improvement plan.
Yes, ma'am.
Each principal is required, and the staffs and those plans, to look at attendance and to increase it over the previous year. And that is tracked. At one point in the district, we had an attendance incentive for each campus, not for the principals, but for the total campus. And the money would go to them if their attendance rate went up by percentages. So they'd have more money to kind of cut that out. Remember when we cut it out, why? But the planning for campuses to look at that is still a part of that campus improvement plan annually.
So I think that would be good to include or to emphasize in the recommendation. And in terms of the principal's evaluation, right, and how are they, among the things that we ought to be looking at are, are they taking advantage of, good programs to bring kids in at the, day one?
I went to the ISD schools because the principal invited us in for a tour. Called me on the phone and said, you need to come down and take a look at this school. And we went to Preston Hall Elementary and we're very impressed, and that's how we got recruited into the ISD schools. I mean, the principals took the initiative to make the phone call.
Or providing more resources to, if we really had 40,000 kids and not show up on the first day, was that shortfall concentrated in 25 schools, and do we provide resources to call around? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out.
I'd say I wouldn't pre-designate the resources. I would put them, either do the incentive, the reward for getting them there. I don't personally like when we allocate money from headquarters and say, go use it this way, because then they feel an obligation to go use it that way without being, when they might have come up with something that costs nothing, or they might have come up with something completely different to accomplish the same goal. Put the goal out there, let them decide how they're going to achieve it, and if they need money, then they apply for it.
Costing me money.
Pardon me?
Y'all are costing me money.
Yeah, we're headed the wrong direction, aren't we?
So you got to spend money to make money, Alice.
It pays for itself.
We could charge them.
Hopefully, this is only worth doing if it pays for itself.
Well, and I don't know if this shows up in the rest of the document, I don't believe it does, but when we talked to or we were being presented with the special ed folks, where they were having trouble enrolling the 1,500 kids, and, we were losing.
Right, in the immigration center.
Yeah, I mean, to hire back those 5 or 6 people to process those would cost about $500,000, but it would pay for itself in 6 days or 8 days, whatever the number was. So that's certainly a recommendation.
Did we end up putting that in? I remember
No.
bringing that up,
No.
but moving them
If
to,
someone would be willing to write that up.
You all
for me,
did include it, good. Because that was what, $10 million over a year that
And moving the intake center to Conrad, did it make sense? I think I threw out moving the intake center to Conrad, since that's the majority of the kids' ultimate destination. This wasn't special ed, it was immigrant.
I don't know what they did, I just know we're working to add it back and get it back in.
Do we know what the migrant population is for the beginning of school?
I'll try to write that up for you.
Because I know a whole lot of kids don't come back because their parents are
No, but
migrant
really,
workers.
can we track that? Because I just wonder how realistic.
I just know on the campus that I was at for all those years, it was big.
That goes back to a point I made earlier, is we're all using personal experience data, and we need to be capturing this data.
To see how many it really is.
If you're not here on the first day of school, the system flashes why, and you've got to put in a reason code.
Okay. All right. I'll be very clear. Number 7 is something that I just feel really strongly about, and we keep asking for it and trying to figure out how we can get more resources, because I just struggle with, one counselor and 400 kids trying to help them get into college, just given those. So I know we've got, right now, just to remind me, we've got EIF and ASP and maybe Princeton Review. I remember there was a third vendor, but this is all funded by Title I.
There's something out of
Title II.
There's two vendors funded by Title I, Principal's Choice.
Right.
They both have different economics, and the service approach is a little bit different, and the principal selects on which he thinks is the best.
Interesting.
I think we've got 2.2.25 million.
An interesting point, just so you know, I had a conversation with Marcia Page at EIF and the guy who runs ASP about having them try and figure out how to collaborate together, because ASP tends to have better results with the top 10% in terms of their relationships with the Ivy League schools and the liberal arts schools and whatnot, whereas the EIF has great expertise with kids who stay locally, and trying to figure out how they could collaborate together so that all kids got the benefit of both what each one's strong at. And I hope they can figure it out, because it sure would be great if we could.
What's not in here is the unknown about the existing counselors. And I think when we had the presentation on the counseling department, we talked about tying performance to measuring counselors' performance.
Well, they probably had very little turnover in the counselor ranks.
Right.
Remember that conversation?
Mm-hmm. And to be fair, there's a feeling that they're doing a lot of, they might be burdened by scheduling, the demands on scheduling, and probably high student mobility or something, but then we don't have consistent alignment in how the counselors, if they track the same kids for the 4 years, or...
Well, the counselors provided us statistics that showed that over the last few years, there was an increase in the number of kids they touched, the number of kids that they were succeeding with. Their fear, if I remember correctly, was that they were about to be put back under the direction of the principals, and they were afraid they were going to essentially be glorified secretaries rather than doing their counselor duties. And they were...
Because right now they report centrally?
They report centrally, and they were really concerned more about that than anything else, that they would just like to stay autonomous at this point and not be put back under the principal's thumb, because they end up doing clerical work and data entry work for the principals instead of counseling.
I think
It's a management issue, but that's,
That makes sense to me, that anyone on site that affects students direct on that campus wouldn't be under the principal's authority. Now, if you're a traveling speech pathologist or something, then...
Counselors report to the principals, and there's a dual evaluation between their supervisor and the principal. The principal has the final sign-off on that. Part of their responsibilities as well is for our college and career readiness program, which you probably ought to include in that, because the district is putting a great deal of money into the college and career readiness department under Liliana Valdez. And part of what they have to report out annually is the number of students who are receiving scholarships and the amount of those scholarships, and that's part of their evaluation as well. A small part of it, but that is a part of their evaluation. And I would think you would want to capture that under number 7, growing a culture aspiring to post-secondary education. Because college and career readiness is really very big, both at the high school level and the middle school level. You can begin to look at some things at elementary.
Are principals evaluated as part of their evaluation on what you just described? In other words, is the high school principal held, do they have any sort of evaluation on, here's where your scores were and whatnot, here's your high school graduation rate, but here's also how many kids that were under your charge that ultimately applied and enrolled, or at least applied and got accepted?
I cannot answer that. What I do know is that the data is available for use, whether it is elementary, getting ready to go to secondary.
Right.
So I'll defer that particular question to Leslie. There was a time when we were in feeder patterns that I do know that was a part of their evaluation. And whether it still is or not, I can't answer.
No,
Leslie's there.
it's not. It's not. It's part of the evaluation for the counselors.
Okay.
At the secondary level, do the counselors get to do any real, like, individual or group counseling at all?
Yes, it's part of their evaluation.
Because I know with just maybe 2 principals at a campus, 2 counselors having to do all the scheduling, all of the scholarship programs, all that, and many of them are testing coordinators and all that. When do they actually get to do that?
Very few high school counselors are testing coordinators. I don't know of any.
Okay.
And, so therefore, the group counseling and individual counseling is a part of their evaluation. It's part of their instrument.
Okay. Does it count if the student enrolls in a vocational college or a vocational program? Or is this only like a university or community college?
I think we track all of it.
We should track all of it.
Post-secondary engagement, I think,
Okay.
is what they're looking for.
Okay.
I put in this comment, I think, because I had it in my notes, finding marketing dollars to ensure better visibility to 8th grade students of different career paths found within DISD programs. Do we think we do a good job here, or is this just my impression? Do we feel like we market enough the various options to our 8th graders?
No, we don't.
Only at the magnet schools,
Not the comprehensive.
not the comprehensive high schools.
One of the things we put in for next year is to relook at that whole middle school initiative that we had years ago, where we weren't focusing on our middle school kids being able to explore the options, doing college visits, looking at career options, looking at what the availability is within the district where they have interests for high school, that kind of thing. So we're going to go back to that next year. Put a little money into titles for next year.
So what I've added here for what it's worth is perhaps considering making principals accountable for post-secondary results, including college and career readiness as part of the counselor evaluation, include Shirley's comment. Clarify that I'm really talking as much about within the 8th grade students within our comprehensives, because we feel like we do a pretty good job in our magnets, is that what I'm hearing?
Magnus have the highest scholarship dollars and the number of kids who we can track that are going to colleges, post-4.
But in terms of our 8th graders, do we feel
They
like
only hear about the magnets.
the ones who are in the magnets, in other words, do we do a good job of marketing our magnets or
We do an excellent job marketing our
But no other program.
But not, yeah.
besides the magnets?
Besides the
Right.
magnets, so.
That's the whole point.
With a few exceptions. I know that with JL now becoming an pre-IB school, that feeder
Oh,
pattern
sure.
is going to be very strong.
Yeah, there are exceptions, but
No, I'm just saying, that just started, and that's what we want to begin looking at for the feeder patterns.
Okay.
But I would, you're limiting this to middle school. I think there are things that elementary school principals are doing with, I got some information last week with what different campuses are doing to create an ongoing,
College and career readiness, the other
Right.
one was saying, we're taking it all the way down to elementary now.
yeah,
too.
starting with, future day in first grade and do a college brochure and interview teachers and where they went to college in 5th grade, and there's other stuff in between. So I wouldn't limit it. I wouldn't start in 7th grade. I'd say,
Well, it's not just growing the culture among students, it's growing the culture among the parents, too.
Exactly.
Sure.
I mean, that's critical.
Okay.
Can I just say just a quick word about that, because it is critical. One of the things that we were doing in Southeast was making sure that each terminal grade, whether you had a 3rd grade was your last grade, or 5th grade or 6th grade, that all of those kids did a college tour. We took from Phyllis Wheatley, which is a pre-K3, their 3rd graders went to Jarvis Christian, I think it was. It took parents with them. The parents thanked the principal for inviting them to be the volunteer because it was the first time they themselves had ever been on a college campus. So to your point, that we've got to build awareness among our parents is critical if we're going to build college and career readiness consciousness among our students. So we're thinking about doing things like having parent workshops on college campuses so that parents can begin seeing those campuses, making sure they go on the tours with them, that kind of thing.
That's a great idea.
But your point is very, very valid. Very valid. So you're going to include that in your reworking too? Thank you.
Yes,
ma'am.
Limit parental engagement in college readiness administrative staffing to data collection, compliance reporting, and monitoring.
it should be, I put that in, that it should be campus initiated with the support of headquarters instead of headquarters initiated.
Okay. Would you mind amending that and send me your language?
Oh, that is my language.
It is your language? I'm sorry. Okay. Does anyone feel strongly about this one way or the other? I think this goes with the mindset of pushing things down the campus. You're not building up large groups in these areas centrally. Leave it, take it out?
I like it.
Okay. 9, we talked about. 10, this was just making sure that as we've got these regional field houses, as we've gotten smaller campuses, you know, and we perhaps have less students who can afford to go to these games that are held regionally, just making sure that we're always looking at our attendance figures and saying, does it make sense? Maybe certain games we go to the regional field houses because we're going to have a big crowd, or it's a district championship game or something. But can we use home gyms more often, where more of the kids? And I assume most of our kids play home and home. Maybe that's not the right assumption, but at least in basketball it would be. But
How big a number are we talking about?
I have no
here?
idea.
Did you have a sense for this? You were pretty good about getting data for your points. I didn't know if you had a number for that.
I just know when I go to Lowe's Fieldhouse and it holds 5,000 people, and there's maybe 300 people there at most.
Right.
It just feels like that's probably not the
But
best
we've got
place.
security for 5,000.
Yeah.
Versus if you'd held it at W.T. White playing TJ at one of the home gyms, that would probably.
You know, I think about, we're going to hand this out to some trustees, and it would be good to be able to put something behind it as a way to indicate this is important,
This is more, this is more just, it seems logical without numbers.
Maybe it gets blended with 17, which is, I still hope we have an extracurricular task force, because, again, we're drawing on personal experience, but when you play DISD, you go to Lowe's. When you play Lake Highlands, you go to Lake Highlands.
Or we go to Highland Park, go to Highland Park.
Mm-hmm. But I don't know, we do have those assets sitting there, so and I know we've done something, there's somebody doing a really good job of tracking when people are using our facilities and they're not the home team, they're like a rec league or something, but almost to a fault, because I've heard a story at a booster club meeting where our swim team showed up to practice and they had to wait for the club team to finish. So we want to fully utilize the assets, but we want to give priority to the DISD
Alan, at
students.
Louisville, did you guys do at home gyms, or did you have regional field out? I'm sorry?
We had everything at
Everything
every
at
campus.
campus.
Swimming pools too?
Okay, do people want to leave it here? You want to put it and fold it into the
It
task
needs to be
force?
studied. I mean, the other
So
thing
this
is,
is just, I mean, you've done enough of these commissions, right? I mean, I look at this and I see it kind of just drifting off into the ether, right? Unless we either gather some data, put a number to it, show the trustees that it's worth focusing on, because they can only focus on so many things, right?
Would it be
So-
appropriate to ask the AD to look at this for us, come back to us with numbers? Okay, all right, we'll get more numbers. Okay. 11, Director of Strategic Partnerships, so someone who can respond quickly when DISD is approached about going into bed with a nonprofit, can gather data to prove the effectiveness of that program, so if it is effective, that nonprofit can scale, can serve as a gatekeeper for the numerous outreaches that are made by nonprofits to principals, and also seeking, and this could be multiple positions, I think someone made that point. You know, right now, if I remember asking the question, Steve, you said right now, or somebody told me, we don't really have somebody within DIC who's focusing on just writing grants to bring in additional dollars to the district. We really are more of a compliance function to make sure we're spending our Title I and Title II money.
We have some people that I mean, everybody gets emails and follows along, but there's no concerted effort to make sure that that position retired year before last, or actually last year.
was that Linda Johnson or someone else?
No, it was Gloria Sticks.
Yeah, this is a staff person, not the foundation.
She's out, I mean, she's out doing that really and it's what Jim did at Northeast, is hire a contract person to come in and to track that, and they end up paying for themselves multiple times if that's all they're focusing on. Just running grants down, making sure, helping people write them.
Whether it's in-house or outsourced, I think it's a necessary departmental function. I mean, I can't imagine why we don't have one. That's.
Everybody okay with this one?
Okay, I didn't think it was too controversial. Okay.
Can I mean, I'm always leery of just adding more central administrative positions. I mean, to the extent it's going to pay for itself, great, but I'd love to see that sort of embodied in the recommendation, that we should experiment with this, it has to prove itself to be effective, so we don't, because otherwise you create a position and this inertia kicks in and it just stays there until forever.
If you put on contracted services, then doesn't it become part of the staff? And, usually contracted services, you contract for a year, 2 years, or 3 years out, so it comes up for renewal.
Name on a percentage of the grants they bring in.
Well, I just say this, I think it's unbelievable that we have a district the size of this, that we don't have a single person writing a single grant. I mean, that's too strong, I apologize, it was too strong.
The grants were done on a campus by campus basis. And they got some central support from school administration and teaching and learning. But there is nobody that's out focused on this as an opportunity.
So let me incorporate some language about, whether it's contracted or some sort has a finite life, or we evaluate on a pilot program, we're not trying to grow this too big, but we experiment with trying to have somebody do it, see if they can pay for themselves. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the emphasis went away from writing new grants to more focusing on being in compliance with the grants.
Right, make sure we didn't have to pay money back.
So we didn't have to pay them back.
Yep.
And now we were on top of that. We have a couple years of really good performance there. We should, and we can take on some more capacity and compliance.
Yeah.
But we don't have the talent anymore to write the grants, to go find them and write them. I mean, there is talent in the district. We just don't have it dedicated to doing it. I mean, there's a lot of people that could do it,
Why don't we finish on 12? I want to be mindful of people's time, and then I'm going to get comments from anybody on the remaining comments, the remaining items. So I'm going to let you do 12. You wrote most of it. Thrown under the bus. Well, she wrote it.
Right.
That's right.
Well, I just kept hearing from people, that whether it was in these meetings or out in the field, that we just have some crazy transportation situations where, whether it's NCLB or whether it's magnet schools or whether it's the thing that came up with when we had the presentation from special education, it just seems like, we don't have money to do everything that we want to do, and we've raised class sizes and all these other things. I just feel like we need to look at transportation. It pretty much speaks to itself if you read it, but the end of it is, I've sat in too many meetings where, I'll speak to one where there was, Paul Quinn wanted to have students come to their campus, and the response was, we don't have buses. The two things that come to mind besides that were to counter that we're driving 5 people from Seagoville to North Dallas for who knows how much money, or a full bus from Seagoville to Dealey, when there are strong schools in Seagoville or nearby. And if you want to do Montessori, you can apply to Harry Stone, or if you want to go to Dealey, then drive yourself. Is instead of whatever that I didn't put in the $4,500 for the van, but anyway, I just feel
I did that.
I feel like we need to have some thresholds for when we're going to provide transportation and when we're not. And with respect to NCLB, I went through the schedules, and you can get them online. It shows how many students were eligible for NCLB, and less than 1% chose to use their waiver, and then we're providing transportation to those students.
That's not an option. School choice, you have to provide transportation.
Well, I went and read.
Anybody that exercises their right on school choice.
But
the major program that we have that is an option of the board is transportation and maintenance.
But the NCLB document that I read on the website that linked to a TEA document said that in the case of long distances, or if cost and long distances could be a reason for not providing it. And just because we're a big district, if we were a smaller district, would we be providing transportation for that great a distance? I feel like it's worth challenging. If we go to the state and we ask for a waiver to save $18 million to put 2 more kids in every classroom, why are we?
We're not even close to that. The school choice program is probably a total about, somewhere between $1.25 million and $1.5 million a year. And we probably are moving
300, 400 students.
probably less than 2,500 kids. It's incredibly inefficient, there's no question about that, because you're dealing with small volumes, and you have a scheduling and routing structure that, you're picking up 2 kids in Seagoville and taking them to Wilmer, doing that kind of stuff. The magnet program is about $5 million a year, and there's no question that is an expensive program and relatively inefficient also, because you're not, you're picking up all over and taking to a location, so you have quite a few pickup and delivery.
And is there an option for non-magnet students to ride those buses? Because the other thing is,
It's never really been that way. It's hard to schedule that. I mean, we generally have dedicated equipment going on a route to one school. Now, it may go back out again, depending upon the bus schedule, like in the afternoon, or depending on the bell schedules. But generally speaking, it's not efficient to mix comprehensive and magnet kids together.
That's a question. Are our magnets 100% occupied?
no.
Generally, they are.
Do you know? Do our magnets operate at 100% capacity?
I don't know that all of them do. I think most of them do. Certainly the ones at Townview. Townview's full. Dealey, Travis, Harry Stone.
Harry Stone's at 81%, Dealey's at 90%, Booker T's at 85%.
No, those are not, that's not correct. I mean, they're.
I mean, that may be theoretical capacity, but I don't think, I don't think they're operating at a higher, above 90.
How many kids are we moving for that $5 million? Do you know offhand?
7,000.
7,000.
Well, the kids go to Skyline, there's a bunch of buses
$700
coming
a
from
kid?
all around the district going into Skyline.
And then 600 a kid for the-
1,800 kids transfer into Skyline. I don't know how many of those get buses,
Quite a few of them.
but 17,000 kids attend a school other than their own. 9,000 of those are going to other neighborhood schools, and 7,000 are going to Magnets, Vanguards. So, and it's a mixed, it's mixed on who gets transportation and who doesn't.
But
So,
that 9,000 is not school choice. That, a lot of that is hardship transfers and other issues like that, isn't it?
oh yeah, or just
Hardship meaning like commuting or parents?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, basically. I mean, we have people in the central staff who drop their kids at Lipscomb over here because it's on the way in from their house.
yeah. I work at the Galleria. I want my kid to go to
I
this
see.
school or
Yep.
and then the other.
Generally, those require the incoming principal's permission. And there's no transportation on that stuff. There's no geo transportation for anything other than the magnets and the comprehensives.
You know, Louisa, I didn't feel strongly about it. If we could get a waiver, fine. But if we can't get a waiver, we can't get a waiver. And it's, on B, I personally would struggle with B, because I'm more focused on getting kids engaged, and what I struggle with more is the inequity of kids who want to go to Magnets, get their transportation paid for, and kids who want to exercise choice another way don't.
Right.
So I struggle with that then versus saying that we should get rid of it for all of them. I can't really speak to, frankly, C and D. And E, I'm all for trying to get more kids on college campuses and college fairs, anything that we can do to make college and post-secondary education more aspirational for our children so they understand why it is that they're doing what they're doing.
I have a question about C. Stephen, I think this would come to you. If we were to do this competition thing in transportation with DART or somebody else versus Dallas County Schools, isn't there a possibility that we'd lose quite a bit of money?
Oh, it's hard,
Yeah.
there's just no way.
Yeah.
We've renegotiated our deal we operated with Dallas County Schools for 3 years without a contract to get where we are. And they are taking some steps to help us save money, and
Right.
we are too. So
That was something a
and
principal
what we
suggested
just-
to
Their
me.
taxing authority and also
That'd be detrimental.
the transportation allotment from the state is impacted significantly because of our size. And it's not if it runs through them.
See, we tried to, at one time, to get the district to get passes for employees for DART, and they do have a program. Whoever it was at the time said, no, they can't do that, but they do have a program for businesses that they could provide services for people
It's
for
not
DART.
cheap, though.
It's not much of a discount.
DART does not give stuff away.
No, I'm not sure anybody does, but
Because they're
I know-
operating at full capacity.
For sure, they don't want our.
Right.
They would really rather not have our kids.
Right, but I'm talking about for employees.
Trains.
Because I know Baylor Hospital does that for theirs, and it's not that much, was it, when you were there? 60% off?
I'm not, hang on, someone asked me to insert that, so I'm not going to hang on to that. But D, it was just striking that we spend $16,000 per student and for monitors, and I certainly understand the need to have them. I just was asking the question, have we studied if it has to be one-to-one or if it can be?
Every single one of those goes through an ARD, and the recommendation is whether or not that the ARD feels like that the child needs to have a one-on-one. So, I mean, it is...
We have no control then, really.
There's really a huge amount of liability with that particular thing. And those are generally paid out of federal funds. Now, that we could always use the federal funds to do something else. But right now, I mean, the IDB funds the monitors, all of the monitors. We pay nothing out of the general fund.
Okay. Well, any other comments on this?
At 12, I can't support A, B, C, or D, but E sounds great.
But we're okay spending $5 million additional for one set of kids and not for others.
Look at me. That's not a decision I made. I mean, that's been in the
That's the board
program
decision, is what you're saying.
forever. And there is, I mean, I would say that you're talking about significant access issues to kids that couldn't go to magnet programs, that are qualified, that couldn't go if they didn't have transportation. Now, some of these kids, you know, have their own cars. I mean, I don't know, but
The board's never tied it to free and reduced lunch perspective. They never said if you're free and reduced lunch, you get free transportation. If not, you pay something.
no, never have. I mean, that's a possibility. I don't know if that's legal or not, but I mean, it's certainly something we could look into.
Okay. Can I ask for anybody who has any problem or any suggestion to items 13 through 20, to please give them to me this week by email. Otherwise, I'm going to assume you approve. Silence indicates approval. Okay? So, that's right. We just need to bring closure to this, so please, and I'll make sure I send an email to people who weren't here for the same thing. And then by the end of this weekend, I will get everybody comments incorporating what we just went through, and we'll stratify them between short and long.
What's your timetable for?
What's your timetable, Mark? When is the briefing is
Thursday.
this Thursday? I mean, I would love to be able to present this to the board at the end of the month, or to the board meeting? I mean, or do you want sooner than that?
Well, if we get, I think the best time, I don't think you can do it by Thursday, so the best time would probably be the next briefing in May. Because then what we're going to do this Thursday, we're going to present something like this, and then we're not going to do anything at the regular board meeting. And the next briefing, we're going to do it again, and then they adopt it in May. So it kind of,
May 10th is the briefing.
May 10th? Okay.
May 7th is that Monday then? For the meeting?
You know, we could still wrap it up by the end of the month. I don't see any reason.
Yeah, I don't need to
In fact, I'd
delay
like to
it.
have
I
them
agree.
Have a chance to digest it, more, better chance of them actually looking at it.
How much of the principals budget commission have they, I understand they spent a good deal of time on the custodial contract. Have they gotten into this level of detail?
about issues and cost-saving efforts and stuff like that, but we didn't go through the budget with them in detail. Mainly because I don't spend that much time with them, because I didn't think time with them.
Do you think it'd be beneficial for them to go through this document?
For the principals? I don't know.
I thought they were doing a parallel of what was.
Good evening, sir. What's up?
And from what I understand, it's not a huge.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
See you, Alan.
Yeah, it doesn't cost the district anything because.
Hey, Alan, did you
Right.
from an ethical standpoint, it really bugs me.